Almost there with YouTube, just a minute.
Okay.
All right, Chairman, you may proceed.
Okay, it's October the 13th, and we are convening the Public Safety Committee. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Narayan, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Here.
Alderman Page,
Present.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Present.
7 present, you have 4.
Okay, we did see some others, but maybe they flushed on and off. So the first part of the agenda, we have to approve the minutes of the October 7th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 7th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
The GPHA.
Alderman Narayan, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Page,
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Aye.
8 aye votes.
Okay, so this is I put this together, and hopefully everybody can make it on somewhat short notice. What sometimes, what aggravates me, it seems like a lot of times the personnel department's getting the blame for workers not being there, and they're saying, oh, it's all held up there. And I received a letter from Mr. Beckelman, Brian, I'm going to go with it, kind of letting me know that this is not actually very factual. In fact, they've sent over a fair amount of people to be dispatchers and also to be like grass cutters and different things. And it seems like they're either not getting return calls from the department heads, or they're being turned down. And that this does not lie within personnel, that personnel is doing what, they're moving people along. And so I want to give them the opportunity to correct this, and so that we all understand what's going on. Because if people are being sent over to answer 911 calls or dispatch or different departments, and they're saying, gee, nobody's applying, or there's nobody there, I think this is a good start. We need to understand, what's going on. So I would ask Brian if you can kind of just go through what you sent me, and you also, I know you sent also something to Alderwoman Howard and maybe a couple of us. But if you can go through that, and Director Franks, in case we have questions, I'd like to correct this. Because if there's something going on up above, and we're sending people along to get these jobs, why? Someone above personnel is going to need to answer some of these questions. So, Brian, if you can go ahead, I'm going to kind of mute myself so that I don't talk over you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Vaccaro, and the rest of the board members here today. I can only imagine how busy you all are, and both my director and I, and in particular, the staff of the recruitment and examination section, are very grateful for your time and this opportunity to speak. I'd like to start out by giving you a little bit of context. Whatever complaints you've been receiving from the operating departments about our inability to provide employees to them. I'd just like to respectfully point out that there's been a hiring freeze that was in effect largely because of, to my understanding, a $72 million shortfall to the city's operating budget, which was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which was completely unforeseen. Now, the hiring freeze was lifted May 17th. That said, I want to point out that come May 17th of this year, the exam staff didn't start scrambling to get people on hire list for the operating departments. A lot of city departments and some sections of the Department of Personnel even allowed their employees to telework. While I was over the recruitment and exam section, and myself and the Senior Deputy Director of Personnel made the tough decision that staff were going to continue to come to the office every day in not only our payroll section, personal services, but the recruitment and examination section. So I want to make sure everyone understands that unless somebody was exposed and we had to quarantine, the staff were coming to the office every day during the pandemic to review applications, to contact our applicants by US mail, email, and the telephone to try and connect them with employment in the city civil service. With social distancing in mind, we suspended all in-person testing. So that means applicants weren't coming to the office to interview with interview panels. They weren't coming here to take written tests. We were doing experience and training evaluations. It's a traditional form of testing. It's been used a long time. And the basic concept is this: we have minimum qualifications for each city job. Those are based on levels of education or directly related employment experience. Or in the case of utility worker, are you a certain age? So as long as you provided on your application information that led us to determine you met the minimum qualifications for these positions, we reached out to you, our applicants. We contacted applicants by US mail, and copies of every letter sent to every applicant, we have those stored in our database used for contacting applicants. We also contacted applicants by email and by telephone. Candidates that provided anything necessary to go on a hire list were put on the hire list, Alderman. Whether that was proof of a driver's license, proof of an EMT or paramedic license, or proof of a college degree. So with that in mind, please understand that because we were cutting out the time involved in scheduling tests and applicants showing up to test and removing candidates that failed to appear, we were basically putting more candidates on list for city employment faster than ever. Pretty much you apply, you provide your qualifications or proof of, after we contact you, you go on the list. A lot of critical public safety jobs were exempt from the hiring freeze. We did not hire requisitions for police dispatchers. We did not hold those. We did not hold requisitions for correction officers or in EMTs or paramedics. So we've been here all along putting people on lists for getting hired for city jobs. And it's very frustrating to basically get constant feedback that we don't know what we're doing and these candidates are no good. It's also very frustrating when we get emails like the email I forwarded to you last week, Alderman, from a former police officer employee complaining about their experience calling in response to an interview notice with the police department. And this isn't a solitary incident. Unfortunately, we're only responsible for the process up to a certain point. Once we put candidates on our eligible for hire list and refer them to the operating departments, we have no control over that process. We don't control the questions we're asked. We don't control whether or not the departments follow up with the applicants. And if the department chooses not to interview the candidates or not to return their referral paperwork in time, their requisition dies and we start all over. In preparing for this meeting, I noticed that between August of this year and today, 19 certifications or referrals for hiring candidates to 5 different sections of the Department of Public Safety, they were allowed to expire. So I think this is important to point out because here we are, personnel telling these 5 different sections, here you go, here's the candidates you can interview and hire. And rather than appoint people and fill the vacancies, the referral dies and they have to submit another requisition and start all over. It's kind of like the cliche, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. We can provide applicants to our operating departments, but if the city departments don't want to hire them, we can't force them to. Another thing that's very frustrating is under the charter, if there's one vacancy, an appointing authority is allowed up to 6 candidates to fill that vacancy, but it doesn't preclude them from hiring from less than 6 candidates. So as you all know, we have a lot of difficulties with our recruitment right now. And if an appointing authority is sent 3 or 4 candidates off a hire list, and they say, yeah, all 4 or 3 responded, but I want my 6 names to make a decision. We can't prevent that. We can't stop that. Now, we do remind our departments that, hey, if you leave these other candidates we sent you, who you interviewed and who are willing to take the job in pending status, they're not going to wait around forever. So if you wait for more names, understand that you only got the limited amount you did because our recruitment's struggling. And if you wait for more names, these candidates will probably take jobs elsewhere because they're not going to wait forever on you to get back to them and offer them a job. So that's a little bit of context I thought might be helpful. I can elaborate on police dispatchers because I've had to look into hiring for that particular position for some time now. I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions.
I had a couple. So
Yes, sir.
19 that were just left to die, I guess they never got back with, under public safety. How
Yes.
many of those are what departments was that? Dispatchers, was that EMT, was that police officers?
So the 5 departments, Alderman Vaccaro, there were 6 referrals allowed to die for the building division, 5 referrals allowed to die for the police division, 5 referrals allowed to die for neighborhood stabilization, 2 referrals for the Department of Corrections, and 1 referral for the City Emergency Management Agency. I can provide the specific positions right now if you want. It'll take me a moment, but
That would be good as long as we don't have names. I don't think we can have names.
Sure, absolutely. If you'll just bear with me.
And how many people, do you know offhand, how many people you sent over to be 911 dispatchers? That they, I guess they claim there's a big shortage there, but is there people that you've already sent over, they just haven't hired them, or they haven't returned their calls?
Well, I looked at that specifically. I don't know how far you would like to go back, but to make sure I was trying to be as responsive as possible,
Right.
Before our meeting, I looked at referral records for police dispatchers going back to March of 2018. I chose that particular date because I kind of look at it as the COVID-19 pandemic. I look at it hitting us March of 2020.
Okay.
So I tried to go back a couple years before that. So between March of 2018 and the present, I show that if you use the code not selected, which means The candidate was referred off the list. They showed up, they were interviewed, and the police department said, nah, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want you. I show that there were 38 instances of that happening. Now, the reason I think this is significant is because, I'm sorry, I'll just say it. I think it's a little hypocritical to say personnel is not getting us people to fill our vacancies. And between March of 2018 and today, there were 38 times people showed up for an interview and could have been hired, and they weren't selected for hire. Now, I will always fully acknowledge that hiring is at the sole discretion of the appointing authority and their designee. I understand that. Everyone in personnel understands that. But, you know, if you want to say personnel isn't getting you enough people to hire, that kind of bothers me because the latest table of organization report was released before our meeting this afternoon. It's based on city payroll records. So going by the payroll, our paychecks that we're going to get this Friday, according to police department records, they've got 25 authorized police dispatcher vacancies. And, you know, there's 38 times people were referred off of list and not hired. Now, dispatcher is also kind of a sore subject with me because I had to investigate the certifications and hiring for that position. It started in late 2019, and I'll just say it as plainly and simply as I can. Before the COVID pandemic, before we stopped interviewing people in person, we were doing interview panels. And I started looking at police dispatcher trainee more closely because we relied on police division staff to do those interviews. And we could have done interviews more frequently, but we were waiting for the availability of the people we agreed to put on the panel. At the end of the day, the Department of Personnel decides who from an operating department will do scoring on civil service test. We have final say over that, but we're not autocrats. We want subject matter experts from the operating departments, and we're kind of stuck with working on their schedule. So the next thing I noticed is we were putting candidates on the eligible for hire list, and less than a month after being certified, most of them were being coded on the return paperwork as failed to respond or not interested. And I thought that was kind of odd because I thought, well, these people interviewed less than 30 days ago. They're being referred a week or two later. All of a sudden, in less than a month, they're no longer interested, or that many are failing to respond. So I started picking up the phone and calling candidates. And what I discovered was that 17 candidates who were coded as failed to respond or not interested or not available pretty much told me, no, that's not what happened. I showed up for an interview and I never received any follow-up. Now, if this were just one or two or three applicants, I'd think, well, maybe there's got to be some misunderstanding here, but I think 17 is a significant number. So finally, August 12th of 2020, at the request of the former director of public safety, we did a meeting. So it was command staff of the police division, the former director of public safety, the senior deputy director of personnel, Director Frank, and myself. And we talked about this. And basically, what we said was, if there's a misunderstanding or disconnect, let's clear that up. We understand that people might not understand the rules or always want to pick up the phone and call us. But one thing we want to clear up, we know that if you're going to work as a police dispatcher, you have to have access to Regis or Mules or both. And we understand that there's a stricter background check for using those databases and working in the police division in general. So we made it clear that if you want to remove somebody from a hiring list, you don't code them as failed to respond or not interested because they can't pass your background check, you write the director of personnel a letter requesting their removal and providing what came up in the background check so we can document that, hey, this person can't access Regis or Mules. No point in leaving them on a job that requires using that information technology. So at the time of that meeting on August 12th of 2020, there were only 13 police dispatcher vacancies. What the senior deputy director of personnel agreed to do was to certify the entire eligible for hire list for filling those 13 vacancies. We certified, I want to say, 65 candidates off the list, the entire list. And our senior deputy also said, in addition to hiring for these 13 vacancies, you can overfill by 10, hire 10 extra. So when all said and done, when that paperwork was returned, only 5 candidates were hired. So we had to go back to the drawing board and certify all over again when we got the next requisition. Well, what I found out after that is, in calling to follow up with candidates who were coded, failed to respond, or not interested, I found 4 more candidates who told me that's not what happened. They showed up, they interviewed. Some of them even said they were going to be sent a hire packet in the mail. That never happened, and that they were glad I called because they didn't know what was going on. So as a result of this, the director of personnel, Director Frank, sent a letter to former public safety director Judge Edwards in November of last year, saying we can no longer look at this as a mistake or a misunderstanding. We'd like you to do an investigation because now we're starting to suspect that candidates' responses are being coded in such a way to deliberately remove them from the list and not going through the proper measures to do that. Director Frank got an email back from Director Edwards. He said he would do an investigation. Well, we never got a formal response. We did get an email back basically saying, we don't see any grounds to your claim that records are being falsified or improperly completed. And I was pretty much told, myself or anybody else that wants to make that allegation can come to internal affairs and do an interview with IAD. I wrote back and said, no, that's not necessary. The director of personnel has subpoena powers. If he wants to do his own investigation, if he wants to put me under oath, he can do that. And frankly, I'm not going to waste anyone's time making up stories. I called 17 candidates. We did a meeting. After the meeting, I called and spoke with another 4 candidates that basically told me that the way they were coded on the referral form returned from the police division to the Department of Personnel did not match their interviewing experience with the police division. So we know there's been problems for a while. We're trying to take action, and I think we're at a point now with where the Director Frank, the senior deputy, and I, we're coming forward to you with this information because it seems that more and more people are criticizing the Department of Personnel and saying they're not providing people. And, you know, I've got 21 people that interviewed and were willing to take the job and not offered, and their code on the return referral form doesn't match what they're telling me when I interview them on the phone.
And
Now, we did do a meeting with the current director of public safety and command staff on June 4th. We did mention that this happened. Since then, you know, we've seen improvement. But at the end of the day, I would like to point out this. When we did that meeting on June 4th, there was a senior commander of the police division that told me and Director Frank that the reason the police division wasn't hiring the majority of candidates we sent them was because they couldn't pass the background check. Now, Director Frank and I questioned this because, and you know, it's one thing I think, to say, well, these 10 or 20 candidates can't pass the background check. But we've sent over 100 candidates at this point, and we're kind of sitting there scratching their heads. And I even said, you know, are you telling me over 60 candidates can't all pass the background check? The response I got to that, Alderman, was, well, we also interview them and we just don't think they can handle the stress of the job. Now, Director Frank and I understand that being a police dispatcher is an incredibly stressful job. But here are the points we brought up when we were told that in our meeting on June 4th. They have to undergo successful completion of a pre-employment psychological evaluation before they're hired. It's not just passing a medical fitness for duty that includes a drug screen. It's a psychological evaluation from the same psychologist or psychiatrist, pardon me, that evaluates candidates for police officer trainee or deputy marshal or park ranger or any armed position for the police division. In addition to having to pass the psychological evaluation, they're supposed to get 80 hours of on-the-floor training before they're put on the floor to answer those calls coming in. So, you know, to say you're concerned about whether or not applicants can handle the stress of the job when you haven't even given them a chance to come in and sit on the couch and talk to the psychiatrist or go through the training, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. If you're so desperate to fill your vacancies, why aren't you at least giving them that opportunity? And I'd also like to point out that the director can approve an 11-month working test period for any dispatcher. And barring something seriously egregious, after 30 days on the job, if you don't think somebody's working out, you can fail the working test period. You can fail any civil service employee's working test period after 30 days. You don't need a reason. You can just say, I'm sorry, I don't think this is working out. So with that in mind, it's troubling to me to sit back and hear all the criticism the director, myself, his exam staff are getting. And I just want to share this information in hopes that you understand there's other factors in play here that I don't think are being shared with you.
No, I mean, it seems, and I'm going to let, wait a minute, I'm unmuted. It seems to me if you sent 100 and then you sent over 65, and out of 65 people, they could only find 5. And, you know, and I know we also talked about utility workers as another category that they're saying, gee, we just can't get people that are willing to want to come out and cut trees or cut grass, and yet people are going over. It seems to me, and I'm not accusing anybody, but it seems to me that somewhat intentional, and it seems to me that they've been trying to make personnel the scapegoat, saying, well, those scoundrels down there, they're not sending anybody. It's all held up. They're too slow to interview. And, and I'll be honest with you, I consider myself somewhat of a friend with the director. I mean, we're not like going out drinking buddies. I don't drink, but, I've always found him to be pretty honest with me. And, but even I was starting to think, well, what's going on down there? And I really was happy to hear from you. I think what I'm going to do is, I'm sure other people, maybe even some people off the committee, probably have questions, and but it seems to me to be somewhat intentional that they try to create these scenarios. I know they're trying to put the fire in the police 911 dispatchers, but yet it seems when you send that many candidates over, the delays at 911 are not because of lack of sending over, applicants. It seems more like a lack of them willing to accept. And then you start to wonder, well, they're just trying to create a scenario or a shortage to put people together. I mean, that's just maybe not factual. I hope it's not factual, But it sure seems to me if you sent 100 people, and then recently 65, and out of 65, 5 get hired, 17, actually, I think you said 21 totally didn't get any response. That's a concern. That certainly means that, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to let, because I'm sure there's a lot of committee members that are going to have questions. So I am going to, Vice Chairman Boyd, you're actually first on the list of seniority. And I don't know, he's got something going on for the second. Vice Chairman Boyd, are you, it looks like he's, I can go backwards to him. Vice Chairman Boyd, do you have any questions? He might be having sound problems. So sometimes this doesn't always work. Oh, Mr. French, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Alder people. I appreciate you all being here today. I do want to say one thing, and that is that it's not just the police department. I will say in pardon me, I will say in an abundance of transparency, I do get concerned, not with this current director of public safety, but I am concerned when I see that, that many different organizations go down and really kind of lobby the state in terms of residency and doing their own thing. And they also every year have been submitting legislation for local control to go backwards, to take that away from the city. So that does raise eyebrows. But that being said, you're exactly right, Brian, and also Alderman Vaccaro. There's other departments like water department where, we've had a couple of requisitions that died, that had, good certifications. We had something from animal control where the person, the appointing authority claimed that they didn't have anybody and that they were looking for, increases when in fact, we had just sent them, a full certification for animal control officers and it died. We did have a meeting with Dr. Isom. I am in no way implicating him. During the meeting, he indicated to his command staff that he thought they were being too harsh in terms of what they were looking for. We do not even require psychological examinations for our EMS dispatchers or for our fire department dispatchers, which are also very difficult jobs. And, Dr. Isom said that he was committed to, number one, seeing that the police dispatchers were scored more fairly in the final round of interviews. He also indicated that he was interested in the Department of Personnel's recommendation that the police dispatchers, in order to cut down on wait time, not be the people responsible for actually calling into, looking up on Regis. I used to have to do Regis checks when I worked for the courts, and it's time consuming, that they could get some dedicated lines and get clerical people authorized to do these checks. So it's not just Dr. Isom. I think that he's been helpful and collaborative in working with us, but I just wanted to say that it's been more than one department. During this summer, I have very good relationships with the airport, but at one time they had returned, and Brian can attest to this, 19, that must be the number, 19 different requisitions that were not full, so they didn't get the 6 people. Well, I think many of the board members will remember that, up until 2006, 2007, you only got the top 3 names. And in response to the operating departments, the Board of Aldermen supported my recommendation that we try to go to the people and get 6 names. So I think Brian did a great job of summarizing it. I'm not interested in pointing fingers. I'm just interested in informing the board and finding any way that we can help. I also want to do a call out to Alderman Bosley. I don't know if he's here, but he's made 2 good recommendations that we incorporated. We now, anytime that we reject a candidate, we now put, the information to Slate so that they can talk to a representative from Slate who will then talk with our personnel analyst to find jobs for which they're qualified. Number 2, we also have a phone number to contact the Department of Personnel to find out why you didn't qualify, which is really unusual, but we think it's very good. And number 3, we've developed more trainee classes so that we can hire our own people in the city. Construction equipment operator, heavy equipment operator. We're now, we've got all the people over in refuse. Todd Walterman and his staff has been working very hard with us. And so we're in a much better position where they've got all the people they can handle. So I want to say thank you to the board for its suggestions and its oversight. And also thank you to the operating departments who are collaborating with us and in no way implicating Dr. Isom, but it's just unfortunate that it's gotten to this point. I appreciate everybody's attention to this. Thank you.
Just one quick follow-up, and then we'll move on to the, when you say that refuge has all they can handle, does that mean they have enough drivers now to finally?
They're projecting, Alderman, that they'll have 71 people in the next couple of weeks. So now it's just a matter of how many people they can handle, training and, enough equipment. So, excuse me, Todd sent internal memos. I've been meeting with on a weekly basis with the chief of staff and also Alderman Bosley, and Brian about staffing for refuse. So we're really glad with the collaborative approach we've been able to have with Slate and really getting these positions filled. We've also, done incentives where we give people $1,000 for referral, but more importantly, a $3,000 kind of sign on, I won't call it bonus. And I'm looking to extend that possibly to the streets division. And then finally, we have gotten the draft of the compensation ordinance to go meet with all of our different unions, because we know we're about 20% below on an average, in compensation for city employees. And that'll ultimately be up to the board, the board of Aldermen.
Entities that have our own labs.
Somebody needs to mute their phone.
And so we have a sufficient amount of staff that was already.
Somebody's a little bit out there.
Brian, you need to mute your,
Yeah, right.
because you're getting feedback.
Thank you, Director Franks. I'm going to go down the list. I see Vice Chairman Boyd. He must be, something's going on that's got his attention. So is Alderwoman Davis, did you join us yet? Okay. So Alderwoman Howard, you're next up on the list. So I'm going to mute myself. And
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and I want to tell Director Frank and Mr. Beckelman, thank you for appearing today and your transparency. We get quite a few complaints about not the lack of communication between personnel and the hiring authority and candidates. And I sent this letter on to you a few weeks ago from one of my constituents, and I appreciate your response and detail. Many times, we go around in circles because it's like, let's blame personnel, let's blame the hiring authority, and I think that, the transparency you're exhibiting today, I think is refreshing and brings us to some means of solution to a problem we've had, not just with the current Director of Public Safety, Dr. Isom, but it's been systemic and long going, that people have turned down candidates and not communicated with them. And really, when people are treated like that, it really kind of minimizes our pool of candidates when people don't get treated fairly when they open the door to come in and be employees of our wonderful city. And then the other piece of this is that I really feel as though, the city takes a black eye. One, we do know that we are underpaid, but we do have other amenities to encourage people to come to work for us. We can be negative, and I appreciate Mr. Frank sharing that we are going to be discussing salaries, which I think will help. But I guess my question is, and I don't know either Mr. Frank or Mr. Beckelman can answer this, what do you see as a solution to this, bottleneck of you send out applicants and they don't get hired, they don't get communicated with? Is there some solution that maybe we could borrow from another entity or, to get people on board and working? Because, the retort is right now, since the pandemic, oh, nobody has enough workers, but it sounds as though we have the applicants, we're just not employing them. Do you have any ideas on how to solve this problem?
I'm happy to share my thoughts if my director doesn't want to go first.
Oh, certainly.
Okay. Thank you, Director. So I think I'm really keeping my fingers crossed for the compensation study, Alderwoman. I have a personal experience with a city resident I know who's been employed throughout the pandemic. And out of concern for their job security, they applied for several city positions in their field. They got on several lists. They were offered a job, and when this individual, this personal acquaintance, told the hiring manager what she was currently making, the hiring manager said, "Oh, that's almost what I make." So, I have firsthand experience with people I know living in the city that turned down city jobs because of pay. If the compensation study results and the board can raise city pay, I think that will go a long way. Honestly, I think city residency, yeah, we get complaints about it at job fairs, and I've talked about it before. We realize not everyone wants to live in the city to work here, but I think raising pay will go a long way. The other thing I think would really help is we need the appointing authorities to really take a critical look at what they're asking for when it comes to qualifications for their positions. And here's why I say this. Before the pandemic in 2019, I was doing meetings with Mr. Walterman when he was executive director for operations and Mr. Hayes to try and do something about all the problems we were having and continue to have with filling seasonal utility worker vacancies. So what we decided to do, the senior deputy director and I, previously we required a valid driver's license up to that point for hiring utility workers, and you had to be 18 years old. We dropped the age to 16. Of course, you would need a parental consent form from a minor candidate, and we dropped the license requirement. Well, that allows us to put more individuals on an eligible for hire list for utility worker. But if parks or refuse or streets gives us a requisition, and on there they say, you must have a valid driver's license or must have a commercial driver's license within 6 months, we can't certify all these candidates who don't have a valid driver's license. So as I recently just said to Mr. Walterman in his capacity as refuse commissioner, you're telling me you're having a hard time hiring utility workers for your bulk pickup crews. Well, you need a worker to load the bulk items in the compactor, but you only need one utility worker to drive that vehicle. So instead of giving me a rec for 10 vacancies and saying all 10 utility workers need to have a valid driver's license, can you at least look and say, okay, out of these 10, maybe only 1 or 2 need a license to drive the truck, and then we can have the rest of them ride along on the truck and pick up the bulk items and load them in the truck. There are workarounds like that if the appointing authorities want to work with us. But again, we can't force our ideas on them. They have to be willing to compromise and say, I'd really like 10 utility workers that have a valid driver's license, but if I really only need 4 or 5, then submit a rec for 4 or 5 with a valid driver's license as a requirement, submit another rec that doesn't require a valid driver's license, and here's your prime opportunity to take some kids out of school that are between 16 and 18 and hire them and give them a seasonal job and give them important employment history to not only further their personal growth and development, but maybe inspire them to start looking at the city as an employer of choice and thinking, when I get out of high school, if I don't want to go to college, I can get my driver's license, get a utility worker job with one of these departments earn permanent status and work my way up from there. Because I'm an old recruiter, and one of our selling points is we have a career ladder here at the city. Whether you're an HR specialist one or a utility worker or an accountant, you can work your way up and earn a pretty good living here. So, it's gonna require the departments to really look at what they need from their employees and be willing to compromise with us. Those are my 2 cents worth.
Okay, Mr. Frank, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that 2 things. The other thing that I didn't acknowledge public employees doing was that, we've heard often that people don't get back to the employees, and twice we've attached to our certification form that then the departments have to get back. Well, now we've, unfortunately, I've had to be a little more heavy-handed, and we sent out a directive that now the departments, when they send back a certification and want to fill a vacancy, they have to show us and document the manner and the time and date in which all the other employees were notified, so that we've got, a full 360-degree wraparound, making sure that candidates, whether they're rejected from us, we can tell them why, put them in touch with Slate, tell them jobs they're qualified for, encourage them, or if they are not hired by the departments, they may need another person in the near future, and we don't want to lose those candidates. So I think that's a big thing. The other thing, and I know Alderwoman Howard probably knows this, and soon other people who sit on the health insurance committee, we have really valuable health insurance. I mean, we spend about $8,000 a year on health insurance. It's better than our consultants. And then we still have a pension system. So, I've asked Mercer, our consultants, to take a more active role in marketing, how we can really sell those points to people. I know that, maybe pensions aren't on the mind of people so much, with the younger workers or the newer workers, but healthcare is. And I think that's something that we can really market. We're adding new fertility benefits with a $75,000 cap, for instance, for families, and particularly with women's health issues. We're exploring in vitro fertilization. We're really kind of stepping up our game in terms of the things we're offering, but we need to be able to do a better job of selling that. And I think, that's something we have to work with our consultants with, but we do appreciate the suggestions for the board, because it's made us better. Sometimes you're so close to it, you don't see it. So we do thank the board for its input about how we can be more customer friendly, and hopefully the departments will follow that as well. Thank you.
Back to one of our more critical needs, and I have a question regarding the 9/11 responders for the police department. How far do you certify them? What things do you what boxes do you check on their application before you send them over?
Well, the applications are reviewed to make sure the candidates meet the minimum qualifications. They're pretty basic: prior dispatch experience, prior customer service in a call center work environment, which, if you've ever done it, I understand it might not be as stressful as being a police or fire dispatcher, but it's pretty stressful work in itself. So we review the candidates' applications, and if they meet our qualifications, we put them on the list and we certify them. And then at that point, the police department has 21 days to interview the candidates and return the paperwork telling us who's hired and being sent for the pre-employment medical. And if they need more time, they can request a 30-day extension, which we'll give to them. I'd also like to point out that during the height of the pandemic, we changed it from an initial 21 days to respond and return the paperwork to us to 30 days. So, there's, in my opinion, plenty of time to respond to applicants who call when they get their letters, schedule them for an interview at the department, and hire them. One other thing, too, I'd like to point out is, even though the Department of Personnel mails a letter to our candidates when they're referred off the list saying, you've been referred to the police department for police dispatcher. Call so-and-so at this number. No department has to follow that. As soon as they get our paperwork, they can pick up the phone and call candidates. I just had a discussion with a manager in this department last week. We're both hiring HR specialist ones. They told me they haven't heard from the candidates. I told them, well, I heard from mine. My secretary picked up the phone, called them, and everyone responded. And I recommend you do that because we all know there are problems with the mail still because of COVID. So, I think that's another example of us being able to say, do you really want to fill these vacancies or not? When you get your hire list from the Department of Personnel with the applications, you or your secretary or whoever pick up the phone and call these candidates. And if they tell you that day, no, I'm no longer interested, I found another job, or if you give them 7 days and they don't respond, code the people you're going to interview P for pending, return the form to us, and we'll send you more names. I mean, we do prioritize certain jobs, and police dispatcher is right at the top of the list. So is paramedic, so is police officer. The moment we get the paperwork to send names, we drop what we're doing and we do it as quickly as we can.
Okay. Do you
Mr. Frank.
do the background checks with them at all, or is that goes over to the police department? They do the background checks and the Regis checks and all that?
We let the-
Howard, hang on one sec. I think Director Franks had his hand up wanting to answer that question you asked originally.
Okay, I didn't see him.
Oh,
He's
I'm
up,
sorry.
he's got his hand up.
Okay.
Sorry, Director.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to Brian, what we've done. The police department under Director Isom has been very gracious. They are now for all of our positions doing the criminal background checks. So it used to be that, you would have to walk over and try and get the criminal background check yourself, which was uncomfortable for people, whether it was St. Louis City or St. Louis County. But now we take batches for any position that requires a background check. The police department are running those background checks free for us. So the candidates get that. And in addition, we've been working with the mayor's office and some of the department heads to be able to clear out records that are small. We're working with St. Louis University so that if people have just like bench warrants, things like that, we're working with volunteer attorneys so that they can get their records clean and can come to work. The second thing that we've done, it's really a Band-Aid, but I was asked by the prior administration, the former mayor, to give a $9,000 increase to the police dispatchers. We did also give an increase to their supervisors and their managers, so there wasn't any inequity. We also know, though, that causes compression and that there's an issue there. So we will address that in the new pay study. But suffice to say that now for our dispatchers, after they go through this 6-month training period, making pretty good money, about $38,500, they then go up immediately to police dispatcher 2, and they make more than St. Charles County, and they also make more $300 less than St. Louis County. So we are competitive, and we plan on asking the board to look at our recommendations. So those are other things, that we've done in order to address the immediate emergency, but we've got our work cut out for us, no doubt. So thank you for listening to me about that. I just wanted to inform the board about that.
Okay, well, that answers my question then. And so what I'm hearing you say, just to recap, you are working with the Director of Public Safety and the police dispatchers to get those people on board ASAP.
Yes.
And we've got a complement of people that are eligible and working through that.
Yes. And I know that there's been discussion, which I won't necessarily get into today, but we have just completed a review of the proposed 911 merger, and my department will certainly deal with that. And I understand that it's been completed and it's pending a final review. We will then share that back with public safety, and then I have an obligation to negotiate that with the unions. And
Right.
the unions have been wonderful about meeting and conferring. I know with the vaccine mandate, I met with all of our unions, and they were very helpful, gave us some positive suggestions. They were very pleasant, professional meetings, and we got good feedback in order to improve the process. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. Again, thank you very much for your transparency, and Mr. Beckelman, understand, and Mr. Franks. The reason I sent that letter to you was we get tired of the complaints and the accusations that your department is, falling behind, which is totally untrue. And I think that this has provided a moment of transparency and clears up a lot of misgivings, I guess, or bad stories that we tend to hear. And getting to the root of the problem, I think we're moving ahead, and I think we're on the right path so far. So thank you very much again for the transparency you're offering and the ability to hire and look at what we can do to retain city employees, to give our taxpayers a full complement of services that they're paying for. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll move on to the vice chairman. I'm still shocked that we send over 65 people for dispatchers and only 5 get hired. And we'd even be considering putting fire, which is completely trained different, in with medical, combining them together, and I'll say this very jokingly because somebody will say, oh, well, but, it to me seems like it'd be the same as if we said, well, let's just start having the police or the firemen answer police calls because we're short on police. I just think there's 2 different sets of training. But anyway, I'm gonna go on to vice chairman. Boyd, you were busy, so you would be next, and then from there we'll go down to Alderwoman Spencer would be after you.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm clear based on what your comments. So, Mr. Frank, there's 2 separate courses of training for the police dispatchers and the fire dispatchers. Is that correct?
You're correct, Alderman. EMS, strangely enough, they're the ones that require certification from the state. So during their working test period, they have to obtain that EMS certification. Fire dispatchers, completely different. Sometimes the fire chief will actually assign people who are on light duty for a limited period of time. He'll take firefighters and put them in the fire dispatcher positions. That's not the case for our police department, where we have a number of police officers who are on light duty, either because they're an administrative suspension or under investigation, or on light duty due to physical incapacity, but they are not. I am aware that other jurisdictions do that, where they'll take police officers and who are on light duty and assign them to dispatch positions. But ultimately, those kind of decisions are internal to public safety, and how that department's run under the judgment of Dr. Isom.
So you're of the opinion, if the police and fire dispatchers were in the same space, they can't answer each other's calls. I mean, you have to have someone that's certified. So you're saying the EMS dispatchers are certified by the state, whereas police are not. So the cross training would be difficult, I guess.
You're correct, Alderman. I think that there would have to be a combined job classification, and people would have to receive the appropriate training before they could move up the ladder and start taking, calls from a different, from a different area. So I think you're completely right. The other thing that we'll have to take into consideration is an anomaly that existed before I came here 17 years ago, but the fire dispatchers are in the fire department pay matrix. So any kind of pay matrix, change would have to be negotiated with the unions, and we would have to accommodate all that. So your point is well taken, and I concur.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear. And there are some jurisdictions you're aware of where they are cross-trained, though?
Yeah, we've looked at, Kansas City, for instance, which is one of our nearest neighbors, and we've looked at them and some other jurisdictions as well, but particularly where they do cross-train and then move them up. Even as close as St. Charles, there is one grouping, but you're not allowed to move up into the higher level until you're sufficiently trained in all the different areas. So yes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Would it benefit the city if we had a system whereby we did cross-train? and
Um,
allow people to kind of move up. So what it seems like is there's a higher level of training for firefighters. But if we had then police, but if we train the police dispatchers on how to respond like firefighter dispatchers and vice versa, then we'll have a better pool of talent because it'd be very seamlessly to work either call, right?
That's an excellent question, and that's the point of the review. My classification and compensation section just reviewed that. Brian may have reviewed it. The report just came out today, so I will be reviewing that tonight. So I don't have all the answers in terms of what our position would be. I think it's, that's ultimately an upper level position. And many times, what I've always said is the Department of Personnel is here to implement the visions of the departments and the elected officials. We just kind of, steer things to make sure that things are in compliance with the civil service rules and the ordinances, et cetera, and the charter. So, if that's the decision of the city, that administration, that they want to do this, then, we'll try and make that happen. But I have not yet had an opportunity to review that report, which just came out today. I think we got the report on August 13th, and, it's quite long, and, we will give that due diligence, hopefully have our review completed this week, and then we will forward that feedback to Dr. Isom so he can, take that under advisement about what we think is possible. It would certainly increase flexibility, but whether or not it's the best solution, I don't know yet, sir.
Right. No, and this is why this type of discussion is healthy.
Yeah.
So there's parity with the firefighters if the police gets a pay raise, but it doesn't work vice versa. Is it the same with the EMS dispatchers? Do they get raises at the same time, or if the police get raises, they get raises like the firefighters?
No, they don't, Alderman. The only people who would be the fire dispatchers. There's not that many of them, maybe 14 or 15. Brian could correct me, but there's only a few fire dispatchers, relatively few, but they are lumped in with the same thing as the firefighters. Curiously, while they're in the pay matrix with the firefighters, they're not in the same retirement plan. So they're in the civilian employee retirement system, which, I administer, but they are not in the, they're not in the firefighters retirement system. So it's odd, but only the firemen or fire dispatchers are the ones that have the same pay as firefighters. And those in turn, as you correctly stated, have parity with the police, but it's not reciprocal. I mean, if firefighters get something, we don't have to necessarily give that to the police union.
Okay, so, and because we changed the retirement system for firefighters several years ago, so new dispatchers would not get the same compensation as the senior dispatchers that were, I guess, grandfathered in before we changed the retirement system. Right.
You're exactly right, Alderman. After February 1st, 2013, because Judge Durker made it retroactive 6 months, they're now in FRP. And I'm sorry, not FRP, pardon me. The firefighters are in FRP, but no, the fire dispatchers are still in ERS, have been in ERS, and so they will continue to stay in the employees' retirement system. There's no movement or anything to change their retirement plan.
Okay. And how competitive, as far as the salary, is the salary of a dispatcher who came in after the change in the retirement system to the ones that were already there?
Yeah, I misspoke. Again, they've always been in the employees' retirement system, which is much more frugal. I mean, for the 17, 18 years I've been here, and I believe historically, they've always been in the employees' retirement system. It's only the firefighters themselves who went to FRP effective 2/1/13. So. Okay.
So typically, tell me, how much does a firefighter dispatcher make?
A firefighter dispatcher makes, Brian, do you have that information? I got my compensation ordinance here, but they would start out at the entry level for a firefighter because they have, the same, and I'm looking here at my matrix for the F schedule. So they would make, we don't have a probationary job class for the firefighter. So I'm looking for the F schedule here. I think I would know this all. I'm just having a senior moment.
Working on it now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the fire division starts at 1839 biweekly. So that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but that's
I've got-
about 47,814 per year.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And so the ones coming in brand new will make about that, right? And how long
Yes.
would it take them to catch up to somebody that's been there 10 years?
Well, they would not until they hit range 30, and that's because
Okay.
currently the fire department pay matrix and police department pay matrices are all based on longevity.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out if it just makes sense to me that we would have dispatchers that's trained both with police calls as well as firefighter calls. It just makes logical sense to me. The issue I think most people would have heartburn with would be pay. But if you're not skilled in a certain area, then you really shouldn't have standing on parity. So if you're a police dispatcher, you don't have the same level of certifications as a firefighter dispatcher, then you shouldn't expect to get the same amount of pay. Not to be disparaging, but it just seems like to me, if somebody's going through more intense training, then they should have more compensation. But in saying that, I would hope that we can move toward a system where the current, if we're going to, combine, that we would train the current police dispatchers to answer firefighter calls so that there would be parity and they would be making about the same pay.
Yes, I think possible? That would. Yes, Alderman. I think that is feasible. If that's the direction the city chooses to go in, the aim would be to create a job classification at a lower level that would probably be, responsible for that specialized area, whereas EMS or fire or police. And then in order to get the next higher level, you would be trained in each of those areas, and then you would be qualified to move up automatically and get the higher salary. So you're exactly right.
And I would suggest that if we move in that direction, that the dispatchers that are currently just doing police would be required or offered to go through the training. And if you're required to go through it and opt out, then that's on you. Don't complain about the pay. But if you're asked to go, maybe not required, but if you're requested to go through it as an option and you successfully complete the certification, then you should make the same amount with the same amount of years as the firefighter dispatcher. To me, that would be more than fair. Because I understand there's this little matrix thing. Say again?
I think that sounds very sensible, Alderman. And, I can tell you that, that's sort of like the model that St. Charles did and some of the other few cities that, we've looked at, that is the way that it, that would probably work. And it's interesting, we don't really have them anymore, but under the former Police Commissioner Dotson, we go automatically from a police dispatcher trainee up to a police dispatcher 2. But there were 6 individuals who simply were police dispatcher 1s, and they just couldn't handle the most difficult times. And so I had a discussion with the police commissioner at the time, and he didn't want to get rid of the people. He didn't want to fire them, but they stayed as a police dispatcher 1 voluntarily because they just didn't have the skill set to handle the pressure. But we let them stay in, and then just through attrition, we waited until their jobs left, and then we converted them into the training that would go to a 2. So, you're right on target in terms of, how the city has historically approached that issue.
Okay, good.
Can I ask a quick, I'm curious?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
So in order for that to happen, I think it's like a year-long course or more, because they have to become EMTs. I mean, they have to go to medical. In other words, they're going to have to get their EMT license, which means you would go to college or to, it's not like the city could train them. I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that, because my daughter was an EMT, although she's a dispatcher, but my son's a paramedic, and it's not like it could be, well, I guess, I guess the city firefighters could train people to become EMTs, I guess, if they have someone that's an instructor. But it's a whole course. I don't think you can just become a EMT by just like kind of training. I think it's going to make it a lot more difficult to find people to be able to do both. But I guess because when you asked that, it made me just think. I mean, I don't think they can just train from internally. But
I didn't suggest that. I'm just trying to have the conversation about options. I have no idea how long it takes to train to be an EMT or a police dispatcher even. But if it's an option, as we look at moving forward, then that's part of the whole discussion, to me. It looks like, Brian, you want to chime in on that?
Thank you, Alderman. It's not as stringent as the requirements for getting an EMT license or paramedic license, but it's a emergency medical dispatch certification. So it's not actually a license, but your EMD certification, it's medical training. So you're able to give instructions when somebody calls 911 with an emergency medical event. You want to be able to ask what signs and symptoms are presenting so you can try and diagnose that it could possibly be tachycardia or a stroke or a heart. So it's very basic medical training. It's not to the extent of being a licensed emergency medical technician or paramedic, but it still is medical training, and it is a requirement to be an EMS dispatcher. You have to get your EMD certification and you have to renew it so you can maintain it.
So Brian, if I'm applying to be a firefighter dispatcher, do I have to have experience already? When there's crunch mode for people?
Not for fire alarm dispatch. So you need some kind of qualifying prior dispatch experience, but you don't necessarily have to have prior EMS or police dispatch experience. Now, if you have it, yeah, you're going to qualify to test for a fire alarm dispatcher. But they are, because we have separate job classes, they are their own job class right now. Fire dispatchers do the dispatch for fire calls, EMS for medical, and police for 911 police emergencies when you want the cops to show up.
So wait a minute. So we actually have 3 different dispatchers.
Correct.
Ooh, wait. Okay.
There's fire alarm dispatch, there is EMS dispatch, and there's police dispatcher.
And the fire dispatchers, they pretty much do EMS as well, because you need to know EMS to be a firefighter.
Well, they handle the fire alarm calls. So if you call and say, I think I'm having a stroke, you're going to be routed to the EMS dispatchers who have the emergency medical dispatch training. If you call because your garage or your house or a dumpster's on fire, you're going to be routed to fire alarm, and they're going to dispatch the captain and his privates on a pumper to put out the fire.
Okay.
And those fire dispatchers, they're the ones that have parity with the firefighters in the pay matrix.
Okay. And Richard, how complicated do you think it would be if we did this cross training, and how long do you think it would take?
I haven't seen the recommendation, as I said, Alderman, from Class and Comp, which I've asked them to drill down into.
Okay.
But I think that the training would probably at the minimum take a year, because typically we give about 11 months for people to get the EMS certification. So, my thoughts are it would be a year to 2 years, and that's off the top of my head, to be truthful. We know when we hire a police dispatcher trainee, they've got, typically they're for about many of them like 11 months, before they really, move up. So you're talking at least a minimum of a year. But I do know that the proposal that we received contemplates, moving up to this higher level and possibly a couple different levels, based on how much experience you can get. So I think, it'd be sort of like being an HR specialist or anything else where, you might have experience in training, but, you're presumably bright enough and are going to be able to be trained in other areas of personnel. So, I think it's a doable type of thing. And ultimately it will be something, again, that we will talk to the unions and see what it would cost the city and inform the leaders of what direction they would want to go. So.
Okay, and I think this may be my last question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the city has some kind of partnership with the public schools with the kids. If they're seniors, they can get their EMT license. We still have that?
The unions have talked about that, Alderman, where they're still reaching out to the people in the public schools. And that's been a longstanding tradition. We originally wanted to be able to do that for police and firefighters. But police officers have to be 21 years old. So the former director of public safety worked with us and the Police Foundation to found something like an internship with police cadets. And we liked that because it offered a lot of diversity. I think the last time I looked, 52% of the police cadets were Black. I had good gender diversity, and that funnels them in from age 16 to 18 till 21. They can stay in that program making more money, paid for by the Police Foundation, until they're eligible to apply for police officer trainee. The same thing is true of the fire department goes out and does recruit at the high schools, particularly the city high schools, for EMTs, because you only have to be 18 years of old, in order to, qualify as an EMT. So the problem is, of course, is retaining people. One thing I didn't mention to the board is that, people will say, oh, we're losing people left and right. We do in paramedics. We lose our paramedics after 18 months now, but I just completed an analysis, a turnover analysis, and it's interesting, in both police officers and in police dispatchers, we lose them after 5 years and 10 years. And I think probably the reality is that, after 10 years, those people start under the current pay matrix, they don't get as much money. The rest is civil service. Each of those 30-step pay steps are 1.5%, apart. But when you're a policeman or a fireman, after you hit the 10th year, you only get approximately a 0.3% raise for the rest of your career. And that's, I think, one of the reasons we're seeing many people in the police department now leave after 20 years and retiring. And also more people in fire are talking about it. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, Alderman, is just, looking at recommending a revision to the pay structures of police and fire so that we don't lose some of our experienced people.
You think if police had parity with the fire department, it would smooth itself out?
I don't think so. I think that the problem is even deeper. I think it's the matrix itself, which, I inherited, but I think it's a problem. Again, they get good raises up front, 7%, 6.5%, 6%. Brian can tell you that. But again, after they hit that 10th year, they don't get anything. So they, from years 10 through 30, they're only getting, 0.3 times 20, only a 6% raise.
Yeah.
And that's why we're lagging. Yeah, we're lagging far behind there.
It's kind of like in the military, I don't know, when I went in, it's different matrix now, but after 20 years, you start working for half pay.
Yeah.
Because if you can retire at age of 38, for example, and you can get 50% of your pay, theoretically, you're working for 50% pay. And
that's
so
sort
a lot
of similar.
Of
That's sort of similar, Alderman. I think, for police and fire, it's a little different, but basically after 20 years, you're getting 40% of your salary. After 25 years, you're getting 50% of your salary.
Yeah.
So a lot of people won't stick around till 30 years to get that 75%. You're right. We're seeing more and more people going, I'm out. And curiously, I just looked, and less than 30% of the people, for instance, who leave our police department are not leaving for other law enforcement jobs. They're going into civilian positions, they're going into security, IT, et cetera. So while you'll hear the unions talk a lot about losing people to other jurisdictions, it's not really for money. We'll lose a lot of police officers to Franklin County, Jefferson County, et cetera, where the stress is just less. So it's not just a money thing. I think Alderman Howard brought that up. It's not just money, it's work environment and the stressors, that come with working in a big city. So.
And after 20 years, why not? I mean,
Yes,
I would probably
exactly.
take that option as well. So anyway,
That's
thank
what
you,
I think.
Richard. I'm going to extend, yield back so some other colleagues can have.
Thank you. Thank you.
The only other, I wanted to follow up. So the firemen that do light duty, they have to also have that medical training. If they don't have it, they can't do the light duty, right?
That's correct. It's optional for them, Alderman. If a firefighter gets a EMT license, they get a $29 biweekly added to their pay. And, that's a special educational pay that they get. If they get a paramedic license, they get a $58 biweekly. And that was negotiated with the unions. And it's advantageous for the fire department because then the fire chief has the flexibility that if he's short in fire dispatchers or EMS dispatchers, he can move those people, into those positions, or they can actually run on the, on the engines as a paramedic, and he can assign them to overtime. If they don't have that, though, he doesn't have that luxury. So it is only, you're correct again, that's only for the people that have the required training or licensure, which would be a paramedic or an EMT.
So I see Alderwoman Davis joined us. So Alderwoman Davis, are you ready to ask questions, or did you want to hang out a while before you ask? You're next.
I'm ready to ask questions. I've been listening, even though I didn't have my picture up.
Okay.
And I'm ready, sir.
Okay, so you're then I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to do my best not to disrupt, which is hard for me with my, but I'm going.
First, I want to say that what is wrong with my microphone? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, ma'am. Yes, Alderwoman.
Okay. It was doing crazy things here. I wanted to say, first of all, that the conversation has been very informative, and I think you have identified some things that we've had questions about for a while. And my main concern is that we have the opportunity to go into the 21st century with our system being one, and also having the ability for all of our dispatchers to be able to answer any call. That is a more efficient system. And so somehow, some way, I know that your department can work with the unions and figure out how to make that work, how to get everybody trained properly, how to introduce to us the proper salary ranges, all of that. But we must go to the 21st century. This is just so archaic, the way we're structured now. And it really benefits the employee as well. They will be a more valuable employee when they have additional training. And they can feel more secure in having additional information. And Richard, I wanted to ask you directly, when we talked about the training that's required, the medical training, can somebody explain? I know that the training includes, because I viewed it at the community college, but it includes like the CPR and those kind of basic types of understandings of what you should do based on the circumstances. And so it's not like trying to get a medical license, but it just prepares a person to do those immediate interventions. Am I right or wrong?
Brian might be able to speak to more of the specifics, but I can tell you that, we do have a medical officer who is out at the fire department, who's extremely capable, Captain Richardson. And then additionally, the chief, and I have clarified that anyone who is seeking to get, and he encourages this, seeking to get these licensures, can, if they can possibly be granted time off, they can get paid for that. And they also can get, reimbursed for specific coursework. So, that's something we're encouraging. What my job is and my staff's job is to get back to Dr. Isom with that report, again, in the proposal, and identify any areas that we think, could benefit from change, or try and figure out any barriers and how to get past them. That's what our charge is to do. And it's always been our charge is if something's identified as an ask or somewhere where the appointing authorities want to go, then that's our job to figure out how within our system, can we do this and how can we pay those people? So I know Dr. Isom feels strongly about that. And that's why we're reviewing his report so that we can make any suggestions prior to us jointly going in and meeting with the unions and discussing our case for why we want to do something.
I appreciate that because I was a little frightened when I heard that we had so many different categories of dispatchers. That is just a no-no. Every major corporation, every call center, everything, people are cross-trained. You answer the call, you handle the business. And so for us to make sure that we are that city as well, I'm hoping that we can bring all this together under one. Everybody is thoroughly trained. And when you answer a call, you handle it because you're prepared.
I
That's all for
appreciate
me
that,
right
Alderwoman.
now. Thank you so
Alderwoman,
much.
thank you. I would like to say that I agree with your philosophy. And one of the things I've asked my staff to do to hopefully get past the commission and present to the Board of Aldermen is a deletion of, we've already got over 100 identified of many of our job classes so that we combine them so that so there are fewer job classes and people can be better cross-trained so that you don't get transferred or people say that's not my job, that we can do that kind of cross-training so that it's more efficient. And it also, as you said, Alderwoman, it's better for the employee. If they have to move or choose a different career, they have a better background. So I really respect what you're saying with that. And thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Back here. So let me go down. So next up would be Alderwoman Kara Spencer. Do you have questions or comments, and are you still here? She may have sometimes, because there's multiple things going on. I'll come back to her if she's up there. Next up would be Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
Yes, sir. First of all, let me thank Mr. Frank, because I've never met you in my life. So this is the first time I've ever seen you. I didn't even know you existed. I thought you were Casper the Ghost. Because I've never seen you. And so it might be because of me being a newer alderwoman. That might be it. But I wanted to ask you, have there been any training? Because I hear a lot of information given today. And so I think as a city, I said it's continuous. I think our biggest weakness is communication. Mm-hmm. And so all this information that you're giving is interesting. And so as city employees or the commissioners or director, are they aware? Have you all trained these people to give them this information and insight so they could be able to pass this information on to their staff? Either one can answer. Brian, it doesn't make.
Oh, okay. I think, we're in regular communication with the appointing authorities, the department heads, et cetera. And so I can say that, from the beginning of the day until I think my last call was probably after 8 o'clock last night, we have one-on-one conversations with the appointing authorities and department directors about what their strategies are for staffing. And we take that all the way to reorganization. We work closely with Slate, Comptroller's office, with the health department, et cetera. So there is pretty intensive communication that goes back and forth, between my department, myself, and my senior managers in order to assist the department. So in terms of specific training, there's a certain amount that goes on under the jurisdiction of, the appointing authorities. But, I echo what everybody's saying in terms about cross-training, and we've got a fair percentage of our people who are firefighters who do decide for economic reasons, but also professional reasons to get that, EMT and paramedic licensure. One of the things that we've also done is made the qualifications more consistent across the board for those 3 separate job classes. And I will just say in general, that's always been something that I've been interested in, but personnel was asked to hold off for several years until, E&A or city administration made a definitive kind of request to combine the job classes. We are there now. And so I think that, again, my job with my staffs is to get that feedback, hopefully within the next week or sooner, back to Dr. Isom so we can have follow-up conversations. I did express what my initial reservations were under the charter and our ordinances, and those were satisfied. And so, at this point, we're just looking at logistics, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, and so I guess the question I'm asking, because when I say training, because myself, as much as other older people, have heard continuously that they'll put applications in, they just get a letter, and they're denied or for whatever reason. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out in regards to, because it seems like it's a breakdown of communication.
Right.
From Todd Waterman to Dan Isom to whoever's in charge, the right hand's not knowing what the left hand doing. And so it's not a reflection of you as an individual of HR. I think it's a reflection of our city. And so communication is our enemy because we don't use that well. We don't get information out to make sure people know. And so I come from a workforce where, with constant changes that happen in your profession, you're constantly meeting with people to make sure they're updated on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm fearful of. And it's not, to me, just not about the police or the fire. It's about city employees as a whole. And so that leads to my next question, because I did voice my concern when they did the bonuses for the refuge, and they didn't do it across the board. And so I think we have a morale issue within the city because, we're not fair across the board on how we're looking at doing incentives to bring employees into our city. And so I'm just trying to figure out what was the logic behind just doing refuge and not doing any other departments, because other departments were suffering, if not more than refuge was suffering. So, how are we looking at that?
Yeah. I'd be glad to answer that, Alderwoman. I'll say that first off, a letter went from me to every single appointing authority asking them if they would like to be considered, any of their job classes, if they would like, them to be considered for the incentive program. And that included at the time the $500 referral, which we did for the police, as well as the $1,000 sign-on. And we know that's what the city could afford at the time when we were facing last year's, very large budget crunch. However, that being said, with refuse, there was such a dire emergency that, Todd Walterman came back and said, can we even increase that amount? And I said, absolutely. The compensation ordinance gives me the authority to approve those incentives. And so we did try that at an increased amount. And I've just received a request from another city department. But there was I got the complete list, maybe only 10 of our appointing authorities were interested at that time in having the incentives. We will go to the negotiation table, and I've got 12 different unions that I work with, and the unions may ask for that as well. And that's, that's something will certainly be the subject of discussion for anybody who's unionized is, can we get our employees this kind of incentive? But, we know that with the workforce shortage, with people retiring earlier, with people wanting to telecommute, some jobs you can telecommute, others you can't. I know Amazon was giving $6,000 and $8,000 for retention increases. After the first year, you get $6,000, $8,000 the after. We might not be able to afford that, but the $1,000, $3,000 worked very good for refuse. But it wasn't really personnel that determined whether or not, we didn't turn anybody down, except for, I think I mentioned animal control, because at that point it came in just a week or two ago and we found out that we had a complete list of people. But we're always willing to entertain any kind of incentive program. And it was just simply that those were the 10 groups that asked for the incentive program. In terms of the communication, that's why we've taken more of an active role in personnel, because we did find out that the appointing authorities, were not responding. Some of them were not responding to the applicants. And so now we are directing them, to do so, or they can't fill the position. So they have to provide documentation that they have in fact done this. And then the other communication that we have is I attend the mayor's monthly cabinet meetings to update them on any labor developments, health insurance developments. We collaborate on the health insurance. We share that information. I'm heavily involved in the COVID vaccination / mandatory testing program, et cetera. So one of the things that came out that I'll end on sharing is that it came out to me, and I was aware of this, that not all of our city employees have a city email account. I think that's barbaric. I think that gives a real disadvantage for people who do not have a city email. I saw this before when House Bill 1413 was out, and we were working with the airport, and 35% of their unionized employees didn't even have an email. So, I've made a formal recommendation, which was supported by the Executive Steering Committee for the new computer system, the ERP plan, that every single city employee should have that so they can get the information that we send out on community. We don't want to rely just on payroll clerks to, give a hard copy to everyone. So I think communication is prime. It is really important. And that's something that we want, as I said earlier, I think we need to do an even better job of in terms of like what our benefits are, what the options are. We believe in that kind of communication. So I agree. I concur.
And so are we looking at ways to build the morale up of our employees? Because I just don't think we're good employers in regards to showing the support from the first responders all the way down to the janitors. I just think it's something we need to be looking at doing to improve the morale of the city employees, the fire department, and the police department. So do we have any packages we're looking at or something we can do?
I think that one of the things that we've done, as I said, is we've lifted the cap off the salary ranges. The people, we had a significant number of people, about almost 25% of our people, 20-some% were at the top of their pay range. So I removed that, the board approved it. So for the last 4 years, people who were even at the top of their salary range were able to get, the salary increase. We've got a very robust wellness program. We've put in gymnasiums at the Carnahan Courthouse building. We've got them at MSI, which is now closed. We put them in corrections. We've got a request from Refuse that we're evaluating to use our wellness funds to be able to, have people have up to 3 hours per week to participate in the wellness programs. We've got the vaccine programs. We've sent out a lot of literature about mental health. We're bringing in BJC to work with first responders. One of the things that we know that particularly our first responders have been subjected to, a lot of stressors through COVID, as well as, the urban unrest that we had before. And so we are working with our healthcare provider, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. I just talked to the president of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, Missouri. They have identified, and my staff had a meeting with them on Monday about bringing on site mental health services that are confidential, seminar kind of individual seminars that can be downloaded through our phone apps, et cetera, that in privacy without facing the stigma that some people feel, unfortunately, about going to the EAP. You can get these kind of services. We are also talking with the Office of Special Events in the mayor's office about resurrecting the Employee of the Month Award, doing that for employees, and possibly resurrecting what had been the Employee of the Year. We held that over at Harris Stowe. There, hundreds and hundreds of people came by and then got a cash award for being the Employee of the Year. So those are things that we are constantly evaluating and, are trying to look at in terms of being more employee friendly. One of the things that I did recommend, unfortunately, the prior administration rejected it. I was hoping that the people who were first responders in particular, who were really at the greatest risk of catching COVID, would have gotten a differential, like a hazard pay. And I explained to them that even the feds, who are notoriously conservative, their Office of Personnel Management Services offered a 10% differential to any employee who, was a first responder. The state of Missouri did it by enacting legislation that if you came into contact with COVID, there was a presumption under the workers' compensation law that automatically covered you. So, we do know that that's an issue. And, I also sent out notifications to all the departments, encouraging them to consider the use of telecommuting, working from home when possible during the height of the COVID vaccine. We've also were able to work with our healthcare providers to waive the cost of deductibles and the cost of any insurance through the height of the pandemic, so that, if they had medical services that were COVID related, they didn't have to pay anything. But we're always open to new suggestions about how we can recognize and really make the work environment more positive, really make it and making people aware that we value not just their physical health, like our programs like Livongo, which are downloadable on your smartphone for diabetes. Now we've expanded it to hypertension. We're including mental health services now. But also I think that component about, we value you. We value what you're doing. So I very much appreciate that as an HR director, is making people feel welcome. That's kind of the notorious story about Amazon. They pay well, but they treat their people so poorly, according to their staff, that they have terrible problems filling the vacancies. And we don't want that. We don't want that.
And last question, Mr. Frank, is I know with COVID, the gyms probably have been closed, but have you participated when you anticipated when you will open them again?
We're relying on Dr. Eccles, the health commissioner, and now we have Dr. Maddie, who's coming on board as the health director. And I had asked originally, I had asked for the city to collect data on the number of city employees anonymously who were vaccinated. Unfortunately, that just didn't occur. And the reason I said that was I was hoping that at the time that we got close to the 70% herd immunity, we would be able to open up the gymnasiums. We did reach out, and unfortunately, the health department could not support that at this time. But I'm hoping that in the near future, we'll be able to do that, because I think the gyms and, again, we're looking at having one located out at Refuse. I've got the funding available to do it. I think that's a wonderful way for people to be able to get away for an hour and work out, take care of themselves, and feel good about themselves. So, I'm very hopeful that in the near future, as our vaccination rates go up, I will get the okay from the health department that it's all right to do that. That's a great question, and it's on the forefront of my mind, trust me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Alderman Brandon Bosley.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I want to go back to the dispatchers real quick. There were a few questions I had, and I do appreciate you all being here today. And to the Department of Personnel, I know you all have been working diligently over the last few months here, trying to ensure we increase the amount of employees that we have, especially in certain departments where we're in dire need of services within the city. My sentiments are definitely with the Alderwoman Davis and Alderwoman Howard, a few other alderpersons also. We all are trying to figure out the best way to move the city forward and utilizing the best methods to do so. I'm sorry. And I think with that, some of that comes with the blame game. I know some of us are saying we don't want to point the fingers, but just being realistic. If anything's ever to be improved, you have to point the finger at the piece, part, or product, or once again, that piece that isn't working correctly or is being misused or is underused. And I think the only way that we rectify some of the issues that are coming with the employment problems here in the city is by saying, that this is where the issue is. This is which department it is. This is who heads that department. This is the manager. This is the director. And we get down to the very, very point of miscommunication. I think it's impossible for us to figure out what we're miscommunicating at. You have all the departments that are, well, not all, but definitely enough of them pointing at the Department of Personnel, and then you have the Department of Personnel pointing the finger back at the departments. I'm not going to speak very, very long today because I like transparency. Not to say that this hasn't been transparent, but I think it'd be more transparent if we had some of these department heads that we're speaking about on the call, actually on the call. And I think that would make for a more productive conversation. Therefore, not only would they be here to defend their position, but we also would be able to find out through paperwork and other conversations who is really dropping the ball here. You know, you have, what do we have, 100 applicants and 60 of them were sent back to be, if I heard that correctly, individuals who are ineligible and don't qualify. We probably should have heard something from the Department of Personnel as a board. So I'm glad you reached out to the public safety office with the previous administration. But, we are very important also. Not only is the public safety office important and the director of public safety, but the board of aldermen and the different committees that we are on, they serve a purpose at the same time. And when you are not getting the direct communication needed to move city services forward or any initiative forward within a particular position that you have, whether it's appointed or you're being hired, then it is your job and within the scope of your job, and especially those individuals who are part of the governing part of these departments, to go over and beyond to ensure that their job is being done and the scope of which they feel like they can achieve greater things out of their job is being investigated into by everybody who is supposed to hold some type of position here in this city to move it forward. So, with all that being said, the individual whom, and I like names, the individual whom we are saying is the liaison or the point person, the communications point person there in the police department. Might I ask, but this could be for Mr. Franks, who is that person in the police department and the personnel division that makes the direct decision? Because I'm hoping it's not a board. I don't think it is. I believe it's one person there, but who made the decision to disqualify or make ineligible those 60 candidates?
My understanding, Alderman, is there's a lieutenant, and that person's fairly recent in their job. It's something that's different about the structure of the police department than other departments is, and it's a concern of mine, is that the police department puts command officers in charge of civilian units, whether that is the lab, their forensics unit. So you've got a lieutenant who is not trained, they're not trained in or have the scientific background over forensics, scientists, firearms examiners, people like that. And the same thing is true of like communications division. Based on my meeting with Dr. Isom and the deputy Lieutenant Colonel Rochelle Jones, it was the lieutenant who makes the hiring decisions in communications.
Okay. I don't mean to cut you off. I just want us to be very direct with the question. I want to be respectful with everybody's time. Yours also. I know we all are. I want to give other people a chance to speak too. I just want, for other folks who are watching, I want to try to follow a timeline real quick, or some sort of a pathway to getting to the end of this question without people trying to figure out what else that we're talking about here in the conversation. So I guess as a direct question, the lieutenant is the individual. One lieutenant makes the decisions on whether or not people have gotten hired for those dispatcher positions. Is that correct?
I'll defer to Brian, but that's my understanding is the lieutenant is the person who is in charge of the hiring process.
Okay.
Yes,
And we-
Director, that's my understanding. The 17 candidates who I spoke with that told me, no, the way they were coded on the referral, there were 2 names I was specifically given. I can say that that lieutenant is no longer over dispatch. But again, the information I have is limited because I'm here in personnel, not in police. And it's usually months later I find out a different person in the police uniform series is over a bunch of civilian employees.
So that's a good point that you're making. Now we're finding out the communication loss. So for over a month, you didn't have any information on who the communication liaison person was from the police department after the lieutenant had either retired or been let go.
Every requisition we receive has a department contact on it. So when the letters go out to refer candidates off the list, it's the contact person the department puts on that requisition. They're probably calling a clerical support person, like a secretary. But ultimately, the appointing authority decides who's going to do their interviewing. So if the police commissioner says, this lieutenant that I put over dispatch is interviewing the candidates and deciding who gets hired, that lieutenant can do that because they've been designated that authority by the police commissioner.
Okay, did that lieutenant leave before or after those candidates were, well, of course it had to be after, but was
After.
that lieutenant leaving a direct, is there any correlation with that lieutenant leaving and these applicants that we're referring to?
That's beyond my scope of knowledge. I couldn't answer that. I can tell you it appears to me that things have improved since our June 4th meeting with Director Isom, Police Commissioner Hayden, Police Lieutenant Colonel Rochelle Jones. A lot of this information provided today was shared with them, and we're not seeing those problems anymore. We're seeing more of an effort to fill the vacancies since that meeting.
Okay.
Now, there is a different lieutenant. There is a different police lieutenant over dispatch now, but the factors back at police in determining which lieutenant gets transferred away from dispatch and which one gets put over it to replace them, that's not something we here in personnel can really answer. The police division is responsible for those.
You direct them, being the Department of Personnel, to send that information over, correct?
Pardon me, I'm sorry, Alderman, I didn't understand the question.
I said, but you can, as the Department of Personnel, request that they do send that information for future situations, correct?
I could request it. I don't have any control over it because the civil service rules give the appointing authority carte blanche, power to transfer people as they want, Alderman. And I can tell you that my observation after 17 years is that the police department, and really with the police since 2013, they do rotate the heads of those different areas very frequently. Even over internal affairs, I think I've seen 3 or 4 different people in the last 6 or 7 years over internal affairs. So they do rotate them over very frequently. And sometimes they tell us, sometimes they don't. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'm not directly referring to the actual transfer. I'm referring to the communication within that transfer. When that transfer happened, I think it'd be within our best interest, especially with you all being the Department of Personnel and there being constant miscommunication between certain departments. They should send you that information. That should be something that you all know, that there's a different person that is making the decisions there. And you all need to meet them or send a liaison from your office to go and meet them, or they need to send someone your way. Therefore, there is communication and understanding in what that potential person who was appointed by the police commissioner is searching for. If there's a new police commissioner here, which will be here soon at some point in time, they're going to request certain things out of their employees. They're going to request their managers to act differently. They may require different ways in the hiring process, they have discernment. So with that, it's within our best interest to know who these people are, how it is that they think to some degree, and what it is they're looking for out of the Department of Personnel. So there can be applicants sent potentially that won't come back ineligible based on that person's idea of what it is they're trying to do in the department. Or, because what it would seem like, and it's just from my perspective, there should have been some communication with that many individuals coming back ineligible, and us having such of a shortage right now. Still to this day, sometimes you can wait 5 to 7 minutes to get emergency services. So, that's something every member of the Board of Aldermen should have known, that, hey, we got all these vacancies. We need something to tell our constituents. And then you have a person in that department who is, which seems like, I'm sorry, Brian just said, it seems like that there was something not so right going on there. And we already are in a heightened situation here in the city where we have, more calls for service from the police department than the police can handle. That's I think some type of emergency communication situation that we all should have been communicated on at some point in time. It didn't necessarily have to come down to what disciplinary actions were going to be taken or how it was going to be dealt with potentially with that potential employee. But if it's one person making decisions and there's any type of feeling within the Department of Personnel that there's something not so right going on here, especially that's a potential harm to all citizens in the city of St. Louis and affects us all as the governing bodies here. I think it's very important moving forward for us to have some type of communication on that level and not just be done to the public safety, once again, director. But, it's all for some clarification on what we can do to kind of help mitigate situations like that, because they don't happen often. But when they do, this is one of those times where we can learn from certain situations and figure out how to best move forward, so we can become a stronger city, a stronger board, and have stronger working relationships with each other. Do we know who the current lieutenant is?
His last name is pronounced Alderman. Well, not pronounced. Brian is Koeln, I believe.
Correct.
And I think what, Alderman says, I think Alderman would be a great HR person since he's already given us a number of good suggestions. But I think that we could draft a letter, if you would, inviting him, to the Department of Personnel, or we could go over to the police division and discuss the current staffing situation, since he obviously feels comfortable talking because he was talking to the press about it. And, and we chose to keep our communications internal, with the board and with Director Eisen. But I think it would help us, to understand what he's looking for and what he's assumed in terms of responsibility, because he's relatively new to the position. And hopefully, we can encourage them to give more of these people a try who go through the psychological exam and go through the 80 hours of training and are already deemed to be qualified. To reject those people outright, is discouraging and problematic when we have that many vacancies. So if you could draft that letter for my signature, and then, we could meet. I find it very helpful too, Alderman. I'm meeting with the new city councilor and also have invited the new streets director and also the new director for human services to meet, so that we can really understand what their vision is and we can help them in the best way possible. So I like that.
That's good. I will most certainly commit to doing so. We'll talk to my assistant today about it. Once again, very, very important piece in us trying to get this communication piece together, which we're all continuing to say there's a communication drop somewhere. And there has to be some responsible party within all of these different conversations that are being tossed out here and the fingers being pointed in so many different directions. We all have things that we could do better. We all have policies that we can change and upgrade. That is a part of us being human and taking different positions that we believe we can do different things with. Every single year, something different happens within the world. So there's always upgrades that's going to be needed. I don't think necessarily pointing the finger all the time is the bad thing. It's hey, we need to do this. These are things we need to get done. The problem is when the finger has been pointed for such a long time and there has been suggestions across the board and everybody is saying what needs to happen and people are aware of those things and write it and don't act on them. And I think that's where the problem comes in, well, not necessarily problem, where, things get a little bit more personal when, I've asked you to do something on multiple times. I've steady said, do this and do that. This could help upgrade this. And I've done those things in writing, but we haven't tried anything, but now we're here. And, that's where a potential place that I would like to get to is, where is all of these different communications in writing for all of the different departments, your office? There's no way we get down 1,000 employees and we can just blame COVID. We're over down. Exactly how many employees are we down right now?
Brian, you want to answer that? It was 1,070, and then it dropped to 1,020. And again, that was a lot of it was a result of the mayoral imposed hiring freeze last year, which, quickly escalates. And the only positive thing about the hiring freeze, while it hurt services, is it prevented us from having to lay off employees, because until the fourth quarter, we were running about $70 million short on our budget. We were able to make up a lot of time. And then also we were able to reduce the cost of the city's health insurance by over $10.4 million, because that program was working very well. So we were able to, not give that money, but reduce the cost to the city of the health insurance and pharmacy benefit costs. And that was given in the last quarter, which helped prevent layoffs to other city employees. So
that's great.
I do appreciate your suggestions. And, I'm an old dog, but I can learn new tricks. I think, Alderman, from your outside perspective, you gave us already the idea about, including slate and including the number for personnel to be able to talk about your minimum qualifications on a personal level with an analyst, linking up with them, and also directing the appointing authorities, which I have the authority to do, and that they had to get back to these people. So, we always are interested in positive ways for change, whether it's in wellness or health. The women's group, the Women's Foundation, really helped me realize that we weren't doing enough proactively for women on the health insurance committee, which hopefully we'll see you at. So we're always glad to see that. I think the one thing I would say about recruitment, and I will be short, but we have career seasonal employees, a lot of them. And I think it's a real shame that we don't grant those people permanent status, even though they're per performance and seasonal. They may work 6 to 8 months of the year, and very few are getting hired. I think this year there was less than 8 of them that were granted permanent status and knew that they could come back to the city. And I think that's very discouraging. And again, I'm happy to have those conversations with the departments, but sometimes I get ignored. So, that's why I know, Alderman, as chair of public employees, you talked about bringing some of us together. I think those face-to-face conversations are good. I mean, we've got the records, it is what it is. I've got it in writing, and I've got, letters saying, I've beseeched you to consider doing this. Give these people the hope that they're going to come back next year. And, I'd like to hear the reasons why they haven't. I mean,
that's right. And that is exactly what we need. It's paperwork, and it's being able to back up what one says, saying that I am really diligently working to do the best that I can in the position that I have. And these are my obstacles. And let's go and look at those obstacles with whatever department or problem or issue that department has in communication, whatever's going on. And we figure out, what is the big issue here? How do we get you to respond better? How do we get, after you've responded and they feel like you all aren't responding better, how do you feel that time is more adequately you're communicated to in an adequate enough time, because they feel like they got a lot going on, just like you all have a lot going on. So we're just trying to find some real balance in the conversation where it's not so much back and forth. And that is something that we will do in public employees. We will have the department heads there, have yourself there, and any other audit people and anybody else, and some of these employees, because a lot of employees have knowledge on what's going on throughout the city also, that they're listening to the managers, that they're every single day doing the job and knowing what it would take to keep the person next to them who's leaving for either a higher pay or leaving for the morale, leaving because one of the managers, or, figuring out what it takes to retain our individuals that we have now and ensure that people are excited about coming to work, doing the job that they've applied for. So, we want to have a real robust conversation and put individuals in the hot seat and really have some discussion with those departments who are saying that, hey, it is Franks' office. And I've heard that directly from individuals. It's Richard Franks. This is the guy. If it wasn't him, then we'd have 1,000 other employees, and those discussions, real talk, these are things that need to have, these are discussions that need to have, that we need to have. Maybe some of them need to be behind closed doors. Of course, not everything needs to be public, but some of them need to be publicized. Therefore, there isn't any throwing a brick and hide in my hand. Like, this is real accountability. Like, what are we doing moving forward? Because people are living every day in circumstances in which they feel like they're paying the city for services and aren't getting them. I got trash in my alleys right now that, we don't have a debris team, of course, but, the point is, if we had individuals that filled up the trash trucks right now, we probably would have some room to add a few other people on the back of the trash trucks like it used to be when I was small, and they pick up a little bit of debris. So it's things that a lot of the residents really don't understand, and it's our job to get down to the bottom of. So this year and next year and year after that, they're not still asking for the exact same services that they've been wondering why they haven't been getting since they've been paying for services within the city. Or individuals that have been paying don't get up and leave because they feel like the county can do better, or we don't have people coming in trying to privatize services, or we get some type of a bill here in the future asking for privatization. If we want to privatize water or privatize trash because the city doesn't have enough employees, or we don't have money at this point, a lot of our residents will vote for things like that because they feel like it beats whatever it is that we have going right now. And we don't want them to blindly or ignorantly vote for things based on changes that we haven't addressed that are addressable. So once again, I appreciate you all and the services you provide. I do want to do the best that we can to maximize the potential of service in our city, especially us being 1,000, jobs short. It takes a very long time to get to that number. It doesn't happen in a year or 2 or 3 or 4. That happens over time. And, some of these department heads, and just being real, like, Alan, a few other ones, they haven't been there for very long. And, some of them have been there for a very long time. Sort of a place of understanding where, it's not a pointing the finger at the person at this point, it's pointing the finger at the actual process. What part of the process are we not changing that's not giving us the best form of communication to get from point A to point B together? And, I think that's where some things are being dropped. It's not necessarily the person, because if Richard Franks wasn't in this position or some of these department heads weren't here, would we still have the same problems and issues that the employees are talking about within the city? Whether you hear or not, are the police morale still down? Do they still feel unappreciated at work? Do they feel underpaid, regardless of whether the hiring manager there is at the police department, whether you are there, whether I'm here as an alder person? How do they feel, regardless of whether we're in these positions or not? And our job is to ensure that whoever is in these positions, rules that we are supposed to work for, feel great about things that are happening, whether we are here or not, and just appreciate our presence, in being here. So, that's where we would like to get to potentially as a city, me as a person. Once again, I appreciate you, appreciate the department, appreciate you both coming out to speak with us.
Thank you.
Like I said, I wouldn't make it very long, but it's got long. But I do want to have those conversations. And I do have one other question. Who is the person from the Department of Personnel inside of the police department?
Her name is Sarah Koziaki. She's the personnel services supervisor. She is assigned and located over there directly. So,
does she have any authority over the lieutenant when it comes down to the hiring process?
No, she would not.
She does not.
No.
So what she does is takes in the applications and sends them down, I guess, if they're qualified to go down to that lieutenant. How does her position work within the police department?
One of the things that she does a number of things. She offers training for the officers who are wanting to take the physical abilities test. So she does that 2 evenings per week. So she works with the academy. She also maintains all the police personnel files, assists with sunshine requests that go to the police along with their law department, and then also assists in police examinations that don't involve police officers. She's married to a police officer, and so we keep a wall between her and just out of we trust her obviously, but we keep a wall for appearance sake, so there's no appearance of a conflict of interest. But she's like the HR generalist who's in charge over at the police division. And Brian, I don't know if you want to add to that. Feel free, but.
I'm sorry, my phone cut off right at married to a police officer. My apologies.
Oh, okay. We were saying that since she's married to a police officer, we don't have her involved in like police promotional processes like police sergeant or anything like that. But otherwise, she administers the civil service. If there's grievances, she's the first line of contact. If there's an employee relations concern, she can talk to my employee relations manager. She works for us and is really the first face that they would come to if they had a problem, related to their employment over there.
Okay, so basically she's there to pretty much what sounds like she's there to be the liaison for your department.
Yes.
And the police department.
Yes.
In terms of what's going on.
Yes.
In the department that they'd like to have some conversation about, pretty much.
She is. And our other liaison is Lieutenant McCloskey, who's the personal representative for the Police Commissioner Hayden on all personnel related issues. So he's the other person that we work with very frequently. Okay.
So in the event, and I'm sure you don't know all the police protocol, not expecting you to either. It's a lot that goes on with different department protocols. But in the event that, let's say, this lieutenant, the new lieutenant or any lieutenant moving forward had this same issue, or in the event of the last one, were they notified? Did they notify you? Did either of the representatives there within the Department of Personnel that works with the police department, did they notify you about those changes, or were they notified at all? I mean, not about
Brian
the
copied me, but Brian can speak to that because Brian reached out on my behalf to the police department about some of the issues, and that's why we had hoped to rectify it with former Director of Public Safety. And when the problem seemed to linger, we reached out to Director Isom in order to try and remedy the situation.
Okay. Was Brian getting ready to answer?
Brian, are you still there? I hear
Yes,
dogs.
I'm here, Director.
Okay. Brian, I think that you had direct contact with the police division over some of the concerns that you had, relative to the police dispatchers specifically.
Yes, Director, and they were pretty much voiced at the June 4th meeting we participated in. And as I mentioned earlier, there has been improvement. We've seen the number of, so the current requisition that we have here is for filling 23 vacancies. As of the records returned to us, it shows that they've filled 22 of them.
Oh, wow.
But
Nice.
they're not on the payroll yet.
Okay,
So,
but still.
They still have to pass the pre-employment medical, the psychological evaluation. I think that's drastic improvement where we were than from when we met with the former public safety director, August 12th.
It's a huge improvement.
Yeah.
A huge improvement. And we rarely see people fail the psychological for police dispatcher. I think I've seen maybe 2 or 3 in all of my years where a police dispatcher has failed the psychological exam. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason I asked is it's good to know who all was in communication during the time where this was happening. And, that I actually know JD McCloskey is actually a good cop. I think he's a great person. And it would definitely seem like, and that's why I really want to have some conversation, because people see things and it'd be very difficult sometimes, especially when you are it feels underprotected for some of these department heads. It feels you feel like you have under protection from the regular staff employees here. They don't want to come up and say anything because they are afraid of disciplinary actions. And some things aren't criminal within some of the behaviors that happen within the departments. That some people just want to see things work better within the scope of the job that they work in. So it's just good to know who has these communications, who knows about some of the things that are happening, and what that line of communication looks like coming from one department to the Department of Personnel. So that was the end line of my question. Once again, I appreciate you both.
Thank you, Alderman. And I will say JD has been wonderful. Lieutenant McCloskey has been wonderful. He's my main contact if I don't work directly with Police Commissioner Hayden. And he's always been responsive. And as I indicated to the board here earlier, he's the person who graciously is running all the background checks for all of our civilian employees. And also, once Alderwoman Howard forwarded me the disturbing complaint about alleged behavior on the part of one of the police command, well, not command, but the police officer with the dispatcher situation, I sent it to him and he's investigating at my request. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, he's a good contact. And that's once again, that's why the communication piece is important. I think people like him and other folks that we are familiar with and that work in these departments that can help us not necessarily oversee, but be eyes in there. It's a realistic thing. We need folks that we trust and know sometimes personally, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be best friends with somebody, but understanding one's character helps you be better communicate with them, and have different type of expectations and have a better working relationship at the same time. So, once again, I just think it'd be important for us to utilize communication upon all lines as much as possible. But once again, I appreciate it. Thank you.
We're gonna. Are you done,
but-
Alderman Bosley?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. And just so you know, we are going to have the chief, Vice Chairman Boyd is putting that together. I want to have individuals so that the meeting isn't, where they're just debating each other. I want to get facts. And we got a lot of good facts. So anyway, I'm going to move on because we still even have a whole other subject to do. And that's with Mr. Pruitt about, arrestees and stuff. So we still have a whole other line of things to go through. Alderman Muhammad, are you here?
I am, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Oldenburg?
No, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. It's been a good discussion thus far. No questions.
Okay. Alderman Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do have a few questions. First off, I want to thank Mr. Frank and Mr. Bockelman for spending their afternoon with us. And Mr. Frank, earlier, just on an aside, I just want to make sure I got the number correctly. You said 30% of the police that are leaving the city are not going into other police work. That was 30?
Yeah, that's correct. And before that, it was 27%. And the police are leaving after 5 years, and then also at approximately 10.5 years after that. So there's two clear times when they leave.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I had the number right there.
That's correct, yes.
So a few questions on the 911 system. I've got some specific questions and then some more general questions. I've had some of my constituents reach out with some more specific questions. There's some concern here, I guess. So if this consolidation comes before you, you'd be accepting of the consolidation, then it sounds like?
I'm looking at the recommendations. Again, I think I will say that as director, I have probably for the last 5 years asked if the city were willing to move in that direction because we've got the 3 separate job classes. I was asked to hold off on that because ENA was considering trying to move them under one facility, and there weren't any distinct plans to do that. So I was kind of on hold. I also took that up with Judge Jimmy Edwards when he was in the position, and basically got the same response, that that was something the city was going to consider in the future. So we were just in a holding pattern until I was presented with the plan by Director Isom. We had asked for it several times because we couldn't opine or negotiate with the unions until we got some kind of plan. We asked for it on August 10th. I sent a reminder email on September 17th, and then we did get the plan. I'm sorry, 7th. We did get the plan on September 13th, and now my staff has finalized a review of it. And so myself and my other deputy director are reviewing that, hopeful to get that out in the next day or two to Director Isom so he can make any final, recommendations, and then hopefully we can have a concurrence and then go to the unions to move forward.
Okay. And so under what you understand of this plan, and if the answer is I don't know, I understand that. Will current dispatch employees lose any raises or promotions?
No one would lose jobs. No, sir. No.
And specifically, there's a title called Senior Fire Equipment Dispatcher, and it has pay parity with fire captains. Do you know if that job will still exist? Will we still be able to promote to that pay for fire dispatch?
I can say that although I've seen just the proposal in the broadest terms from the Department of Public Safety, and what our commitment is that no one should or could lose pay, since this is not a disciplinary action. I think that we are still looking at preserving supervisory and management level positions, whatever form or fashion that takes, within the series. So if anything, I think there would be more opportunities for promotion to higher level positions than there would be for any people who, might lose. That's simply not going to happen. No one will lose promotional opportunities. No one will lose any pay, but there might be more chance for upward mobility to higher level jobs. And that's from looking at both the first blush of what we had drafted. We had drafted some rough job class specification months and months ago before we even saw what the Director of Public Safety was proposing, in anticipation of receiving a report and being able to respond back as expeditiously as possible. So I've had those on my desk for months, and now we'll look to integrate those and recommend best practices as we understand them.
Okay. And then, so my understanding is that there's kind of two different unions that would be represented in any consolidation here. We'd have the fire union and the police union. Has there been any discussion on what happens if the unions themselves don't agree on this consolidation?
I've talked with that in the city council. I mean, the only responsibility we have under the Missouri Constitution and under Ordinance 62234 is, as chief negotiator, I have to meet with them, and then I have to, do my best to reach some kind of agreement. If we don't reach an agreement, there's nothing that prohibits us from moving forward. Now that's not to say that one of the unions or both unions couldn't file for a temporary restraining order or, an injunction. I'm hopeful that we will have, good discussions. I believe that, that will happen. But, hopefully that, we would be able to move in that direction. And ultimately, it would probably have to get approval from the State Board of Mediation. Unlike the police officers who are represented by the SLPOA, those are outside the authority of the State Board of Mediation and come only under my rules because they're professional law enforcement. But the police dispatchers and, who are represented by the Civilian Personnel Division, which is a branch of the SLPOA, they would be represented, and then so would Firefighter 73. We might have to go to this. We would have to go to the state and either get, a unit clarification or possibly a runoff election to see which union would ultimately represent those folks.
Okay, yeah, I know that there's some concern there of folks being kind of pulled out of the union that they're currently in and maybe stuck into another one, or being left without representation. Would fire dispatchers lose out of their pay parity? Would they lose those yearly steps of pay parity?
We're not sure. I think that anything that we did would, number one, anything that we did would have to make sure that they're not paid less than what the current matrix is. I mean, so we would, absolutely have to still honor that provision in terms of salary increases. Any kind of plan would have to accommodate that. I've been very clear with, all the parties that would have to take place. And then, secondly, there would have to be some kind of overarching structure so that, nobody would take a reduction or lose out on those longevity increases. So, that will have to be fashioned into our response. And I've been very upfront with the parties that, we're aware of that and that any kind of consolidation would have to take that into consideration.
Thank you. So then my understanding is that the charter lays out that the 911 system is under the control of the chief of the fire department, Chief Jenkerson. And we kind of did a history lesson last public safety meeting on why that may be, going back to the old call boxes. Under any merged proposal, I guess my understanding would be that Chief Jenkerson would still have to be in charge of that system. Is that your understanding as well?
It's not my understanding based on, my conversations thus far. I have raised that issue both orally and in writing, advising the parties that they need to seek guidance from the city councilor because it's a matter of legal interpretation. It's Article 13, Section 15C of the city charter that you're referencing, I believe, Alderman. And, that I also understand that there are some provisions in the city code and perhaps other sections of the charter. So I recommended in writing, strongly urge them to receive, legal counsel regarding that matter. I think it's a very important matter and one that absolutely has to be addressed.
Thank you. So the most recent numbers that I have is that the police department is about 25 dispatchers short and the fire department's about 9 dispatchers short.
That sounds correct. Yes.
Seem about right? Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure that we're working on some similar numbers at least.
Yeah.
So if we combine them, then we have a combined unit that's 34 dispatchers short, with more work to do. My understanding is also that there's a position that's different than a dispatcher called a call taker or a call evaluator.
I apologize. I'm not familiar with that one, Alderman.
Okay.
Brian maybe, or certainly I would hope my classification manager would be, but I'm not familiar with that particular position.
Perhaps it's being, off the top of my head, perhaps it's the customer service representative 1 and 2, because the proposal we received included taking the customer service reps from the Citizen Service Bureau and putting them in this new combined 911 center. And so maybe that's where that's coming from.
Yeah.
If I could add, I think where it's coming from is when you call 911, the person who answers the phone is not the person who dispatches the call. They are more of a triage person, and they will send that call to a dispatcher to dispatch for police or a fire dispatcher. So when you call 911, there's 3 different levels of 911 dispatchers. But when you call, the first person you get is a call evaluator. It's not necessarily, they're not the person who's dispatching the police, they're taking the call.
Okay, yeah, I'm just getting a text in that's clarifying this some for me. That a call evaluator answers 911 calls, dispatchers dispatch the calls on the radio, and it's a police-only distinction, not a city classification. So that would make sense then as to why there's some confusion there. I was curious if in any merge proposal, if we're 34 dispatchers short. I know that one of the complaints I think that we're hearing citywide about this system is people calling either 911 or the non-emergency line and being on hold, basically. would more of these call evaluators change that situation at all? And if so, is it something that we'd be looking to hire up more call evaluators, or would we need more dispatchers?
I think the argument, Alderman, for merging, at least conceptually, the argument that was presented to me is that it gave more flexibility in terms of deployment of the dispatchers. But if you've got so many units of work and so many calls, you've still got that issue. What I'm hoping will happen, and I have not seen it happen yet, is I made the specific recommendation that and again, I'm reiterating, but that those 911 dispatchers do not have to go into Regis and look up a criminal justice record in mules. And having worked for the courts for 15 years, I've read those reports. They're difficult. They're hard to navigate through. And to me, it seems pointless to be paying a police dispatcher to go through that. I understand why the officers want them. If I were an officer or anybody and pulling somebody over with our poor officers getting shot or accosted or going into a home, you want to know what you're looking at. But by the same token, I think it makes more sense to have clerical people who can also perform that function with a dedicated separate line. And I understand their space, to do that, take that action immediately to alleviate some of the workload and reduce the time delays in picking up a 911 call. So that to me is a simple thing. And I believe that that's something that the mayor and Representative Bush saw when they went out to Denver, was there was a delineation in terms of the duties performed. So that is something that I stand behind, is that, let's get these people performing the most critical duties, whatever you call them, but let's not have them tied up on the Regis system, which is very complicated, so.
Thank you. And is there just one question, then I'll let you off the hot seat from me at least. Has there been any discussion as to what would happen if a current dispatcher was unable to pass their cross training? If, say, a police dispatcher was unable to complete the training for EMS or for fire dispatch, what would happen then with that employee?
Yeah. I've thought of that, and I think I used, in a way, it's an analogous situation where we had the 6 police dispatcher ones that just couldn't handle it as a 2. I think both Director Isam's plan and what we originally contemplated months ago in the Department of Personnel are different levels of these, public safety dispatchers. In order to, it's not that you go down, you would come in with one skill set, but in order to move up, you would have to be cross-trained. So my assumption as an HR person is that you would just simply stay at that lower level, the entry level, which is the 1, whatever system you're talking about. You just simply wouldn't be able to promote until such time if you were able to gain the necessary skills. So it's not like your job would be in jeopardy in either plan. It's just that you wouldn't be able to move up. And, I think that is in the private sector, that's certainly an industry practice. If you are moving to a different kind of system, you give people a sufficient amount of time to learn that skill set. But if at all possible, you try and retain the people and let them be successful at what they can do.
Well, thank you both so much for your time here this afternoon. And with that, I will yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, as always, by the time it gets to me, all the questions that have been asked and everything's been said. But I do want to say all my little notes that I had to ask also have been addressed with the changes you made in the following up and working with Slate. So thank you, Director Franks and Mr. Volkman, for that. I have one thing that I want to ask about before I say that. Please just count me in on any way that I can help support you all with the changes and the working cohesively with the directors and the other departments, because I will say, squeaky wheel gets the oil, and I think a lot of the oil that's been spread is working, because I have been getting people calling and saying that they have been getting hired or they've been getting callbacks and things. So I thank you for that. The free background checks, because that is something that I hear from brothers and sisters about a lot, is that they would have to pay for background checks for every application. So do you have something that you can share that I can share with the community about the free background check piece? I think that would make a difference.
Yeah, Brian, I think Alderwoman, thank you very much, and we appreciate you sharing your experience. And again, I think we're doing more now than most organizations to reach out to our community, and I appreciate that. Brian, maybe you could send something to the Alderwoman that is a informational piece so that people know that they don't have to bear the burden. Number one, there's the cost factor, and number two, if you might have a bench warrant for a speeding ticket or something like that, the last place you want to go is into a police station. That's uncomfortable. So we want to be able to take that pressure off of people, and if possible, working with SLU and some volunteer attorneys, we want to get those things cleaned up. So, Brian, if you could formulate a piece of information for the Alderwoman to be able to share, and if can share that with the chair also, I think that would be wonderful.
Sure. And if I may, real quickly, I'd just like to point out that the police record checks we get for St. Louis City and County, we use them over a 12-month period. So if you apply for 10 different jobs and 5 of them require a police record check, we will use that police record check for those 5 jobs that require it, and anything else you apply for a 12-month period. You turn in a police record, you're good to use it for the following year for any job at the city that requires a police record check.
That is great. Thank you. Please make sure if that's somewhere on there as well, because I'm telling you, that was one thing I heard the most was about, I don't want to, going back and forth to get there. So again, please count me in on these efforts to fill these vacancies. Anything I can do, I absolutely will.
Thank you so much, Alderwoman. We really do appreciate that. We want to get city people into these city jobs in particular and not be relying on per performance and certainly also on contract employees. We don't allow that unless there's absolutely no one else. So thank you.
So, Alderwoman, you're done then, I assume. Alderman Page. Are you still with us? Good. Any questions,
yes.
comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I just have a very brief comment and one question. The comment is that in my corporate life, prior to joining the Board of Aldermen, I managed a unit of 115 seat, if you will, accounting support center. And the vast majority of my employees were union employees. And 2 principles that contributed mightily to our success. The first was simply streamlining job classifications. And I heard that discussed earlier, and I cannot speak highly enough in favor of it. The second one is to simply make sure that that employees have the training that they need to do their jobs well, and to make sure that all employees possible are cross-trained. So that I think those are critically important. I heard them mentioned earlier in the conversation, and I just wanted to amen those principles. The question that I have, I realize that we're primarily speaking about fire, EMS, and police, but I kind of wanted to ask a question about another category. Mr. Director Frank, I believe, and the alderman from the 27th Ward talked about incentives or hiring bonuses, if you will. I recall that Refuse hired, I think there were $1,000 and $3,000 bonuses or hiring incentives. I'm curious to know, how successful were those hiring incentives or signing bonuses? And did they help to bring the Refuse Department to full complement? I don't think I ever heard any statistics on how well that program performed.
Alderman, thank you very much. To your first point, I had just gastritis when I came into this job 17 years ago, and there was over 650 job classes. I mean, there's way, way, way too many. And I know we used to have a workforce of 11,000. Now we've got about 6,300 full-time positions. But I agree. I know that at the very first swipe, my staff is recommending getting rid of over 100 job classes. And I believe in cross-training. In HR, we call it career banding or broad banding, where we can cross-train people and they can perform more jobs. So I 100% agree with you. It makes better employees, more competitive employees, and it's more customer friendly. So we will continue to work on that. With regard to the incentive program for refuse, it's been a huge success. I mean, we saw an explosion of people. There was a lot of talk in the community. We've partnered with the Urban League. My staff has gone out to every single event, whether it's a small event hosted by an alderman or a large organizational event. One thing that we're doing right now, which is exciting, is we're not only working with the Urban League, where we've gotten a number of applications, like 85 applications, and my staff is there to review, to talk to people, point them in the right direction. But also we're working with the Independence Center, which is for people in our community who have chronic mental illness. We're going to be doing a tour of the facility. I am sending a letter to all the appointing authorities, which, we're talking about it at cabinet, then it's going out after Mayor Jones and her staff, have the next cabinet meeting. But we're going to be asking our directors if they will take some of these people. As you know, we moved the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. And these are short-term, limited positions where people who need that kind of stability in their life, whether they're bipolar or schizophrenic, or, they might be just able to file, or they might be engineers that have problems. If we can give them that sense of permanency. I know the Federal Reserve has done it, so I know it could be done in private sector, and we figured out a way to do it. So we're trying to reach out to all aspects of our community. And I think there's some exciting things from a humanitarian and a city perspective that we're doing. And I'm hopeful that we'll see those in the next couple months. But I appreciate your comments. And yes, Brian, if you want to add to that, but as I said earlier, the refuse commissioner, we've canceled our last 2 weekly meetings because we've got all the refuse workers now to be able to hopefully, resume the trash and the recycling pickup. And the Commissioner Walterman has said it's just been a huge success in generating interest. Originally, we only had about 10 of our appointing authorities interested in doing it, but now more and more are doing it. So I'm glad to see that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Alderman and Director Frank. All I would like to add, and forgive me for sounding like a broken record because I know I've brought this up before, but one thing I pride myself on is the HR specialist responsible for screening applications and following up with applicants. We're not like a private company where if you file an application, you'll never hear anything unless months later or weeks later you get a phone call from a recruiter that wants to interview you by the telephone for an initial screening. We respond to every application we receive by US mail. We have copies of those letters, and the staff are all trained and drilled into understanding. They return phone calls, they return emails, and applicants aren't shy. If they don't get a response, they will notify you or their alderman. They'll contact the mayor's office, and the director and I, we follow up on any inquiries we get, being told, hey, I never received a response to my application. I didn't get a phone call back. We investigate that. We follow up with our staff. So we pride ourselves on being responsive, and you will get a response to your application. And as the director mentioned earlier, we took Alderman Bosley's suggestion, or I should say the director did, and now you have our telephone number on the letter saying, I'm sorry, but you don't meet our minimum qualifications. So the number's right there for you to call the HR specialist whose name is on the letter and have a conversation with them. Now, will you get a call back within an hour or that day? Sometimes not. Sometimes it might take 2 business days. Sometimes you might call at 9 o'clock and you don't get a call back till 3 o'clock that day. But we do respond. And we want to hear if somebody doesn't feel they got a timely response, because we will look into the matter and handle it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you both. thank you, Director Frank and Mr. Beckelman, for joining this critically important conversation today. And Director Frank, I will say that as a supporter for more years than I would care to admit of the Independence Center, I sincerely appreciate the city's considering resources from that organization. Thank you again. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed Alderman Gunther has been kind of popping in and out. Did you have some questions, Alderman Gunther?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. No, this has been very informative. Thank you, Director Franks and Brian, for being here, and thanks for acknowledging me, Chairman Vaccaro. But great information.
Okay, and you might want to stay with. So first, well, anyway, thank you, and I'm glad to hear that there's at least 22 dispatchers that have been sent over. They're just not on the rolls yet. So it does look like things are going to get better pretty quickly. What I would just want to thank you too for showing up and enlightening us. It really helps to get these pieces, and it does help me in how I feel about how we're going to combine these. If it's a year or 2 year process and we go through the process and do it properly, yes. And if the dispatchers, you know, I know my daughter had her EMT license. I don't know if she still does or not. She's been there a very long while. If they're going to get paid more up, that they'll be the first ones in line to say, hey, we'll go out and get this. My concern's always been, let's don't rush into something that's going to become a big disaster, you know, because I know when the fire people send the fire department, they also call the gas company and the electric company. There's a little bit more to it. But I'm not going, it's been a long day for you guys, and we got one more topic. So anyway, God bless you guys.
Thank you so much, Alderman. Thank
Director,
you all.
You're in my prayers, and thank you both for coming in.
Thank you. And again, I just want to appreciate all the guidance and feedback and tips and you know, all that from the board, you know, and Alderwoman Tyus has shared with me, and Alderwoman Howard, and now Alderman Bosley. We really appreciate the guidance from the public employees and also from you, Chairman Vaccaro. So thank you very much, and you're in my prayers as well. I hope you take care.
You too. God bless. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Chairman, can
Yes.
can I mention to them that when I sometimes in meetings, I also follow the meeting on YouTube, and I think that Director Frank and Mr. Volkman, it might pay off to look at some of the comments that have been in the chat on YouTube, because there's a lot of good insight and information on them that can maybe play into it.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
It's funny because the chat doesn't come into our chat thing for some reason. But thank you guys. We're gonna move on.
Thank you.
I have Mr. Pruitt with us, and he is with the NAACP, and he's a friend. And what he had mentioned was when some people get arrested, he's gotten complaints or letters about it, and they're at the police department. If I understand this correctly, and I'm gonna let him go through it, a lot of times they'll say, well, look, I'll tell you what, we're gonna go ahead and let you go as long as you will sign something saying that you won't sue us for false arrest. And he feels that that's against their civil rights. And I thought it'd be a good discussion. I guess I think both ways. You know, one would be, it's kind of nice that they do offer, I guess, that. But at the same time, I understand what Mr. Pruitt's saying. And I thought this would be a good discussion. So I'm going to let Mr. Pruitt go through what he says. And I'm interested to see how, as a group, we feel if somehow we should try to figure, and I'm not even sure how we figure it out, But I do think it's something that should be public, and I think it's something we should work through. So I'm gonna let Mr. Pruitt talk. I'm gonna mute myself. Alderman, Chairman Boyd, are you with us still? He might have stepped aside. So Alderman Davis, if you would take over for a brief few minutes while I have to get a little something, and it won't take me 5 minutes. I'm gonna hear everything going on. I'm just gonna. I'm gonna mute myself. And Mr. Pruitt, if you could kind of explain your thoughts, and we'll go through the committee. I'll be back in like 4 minutes, but I'll be listening. I just got to run and get something real fast.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, thank you. Just for a little clarity, is that there's a group of us that have formed what we call the Leadership Council on Criminal Justice Reform. And this matter actually was brought to all of us at different points in time. And once we've really got a handle on it, then it raised a number of concerns. We provided some written testimony that sort of outlines and gives some background, so I won't go through it verbatimly, but I would probably start by saying this. I'm paraphrasing the late, great attorney Johnny Cochran. He said that, the most important person in the justice system is the beat cop. He said, because in most cases, they're the first ones on the scene. They would determine whether crime has actually been committed, and then they have the right to use deadly force to enforce the laws or deal with that situation. And so while we understand that the police department has a tough job to do, and we understand that the police department and police officers come under any number of attacks for any number of different reasons, the reason why this issue sort of raised to a level where we wanted to get together and deal with it was the fact that it's as simple as this. There's a process that's in place as a policy that within the police department and within the city's council's office that basically says that if the police department charges somebody with resisting arrest, even if this person has not used any force against a police officer, even if this person has not even threatened to use force against a police officer, if he's charged with resisting arrest, do not send them to the circuit attorney's office, send them through the municipal courts. And then the policy within the municipal courts or the city's councilor's office who prosecutes the cases in the municipal court is when they come to us and they have a resisting arrest, been charged with resisting arrest or interfering with a police officer, if we decide to amend the charges or drop it, we would not do that under no circumstances unless they sign this waiver, waiving all their civil rights, saying they would not sue the police department, they won't sue the city, they won't do anything, and everything goes away. Now, unless we believe that every time the police arrest and charge somebody with a resisting arrest that they are guilty, which I don't think any of us will agree that 100%, that means there are some people who truly are not guilty of the charges they're being charged with. And in order for them to become unimprisoned, because let's be clear, that means wherever they were handcuffed, they were transported, and in most cases put in some sort of holding facility, a jail, in prison. And the only way they can get out of that situation, and this is an innocent person, is that they sign this document or otherwise be forced to secure counsel, hopefully get some sort of bail, and go through all of that for a charge that in instance could be a trumped up charge. And it is more concerning for us that once they came out with the use of force study, that it said that the predominant group of people who are impacted by use of force are African Americans, and in most cases males, but they say between the ages of 15 and 21, which means you can imagine as a parent, they get a call, your 15, 16, 17-year-old child has been hauled away, and you get there, and they say, well, we're gonna send them home with you, but guess what? We want you to sign this. And once that thing is executed, there is no further investigation whatsoever to determine whether this person actually committed the crime in which they were hauled off and imprisoned and forced to sign away their civil rights to do. And then as we dug a little further, the numbers just became astronomical. Right now, we think that number exceeds 5,000 individuals who have signed this document. And so we believe that it is a significant civil rights issue. We definitely believe that no innocent citizen should have to go through this situation. And more than that, we are hoping that this committee would be the right committee to take a look at these policies, take a look at how they've been implemented, where they come from, why they exist, and if necessary, create legislation that fixes this or prevent this from happening again. Because again, we're not talking about something that is arbitrary. In fact, since 2012, in the St. Louis Police Department, standing orders, if it's a resisting arrest charge, they go to municipal court. They do not go to state court, standing. And then once they get over to municipal court, it is a standing order and policy in the city's council's office that if you're going to amend those charges or let them off the hook, you cannot do that without them signing their rights away. And the unfortunate side of this is that even when they do that, they have to do that within the courts, and it still goes in front of a judge. And we have municipal judges accepting this without any further adjudication to determine whether that person should have been in front of the courts or not. And we had a couple of options in front of us. One, we were going to begin this campaign and advertise for all these people who sign these things to come forth. Let's hear these stories. Then from there, begin some sort of strong advocacy against the city and the department. And, our position was that, we've had a lot of success working with this committee on dealing with issues of this nature. We feel that the committee would be sensitive, fair, and balanced, and taking a strong look at this issue. And let's see what comes out of there. And so that's why we come before you. That's why we submitted this in writing. And all we asking is that the committee digs into this issue and that we ascertain what is really going on and how do we fix this? Because we honestly believe there are innocent people who've been charged. And again, remember, they did not use any force against a police officer, nor did they threaten to use force against a police officer. But somehow they still wind up charged with resisting arrest. And in order for that charge to go away, they had to sign their rights away. And we just don't think that is proper, not only for any city, any municipal government, any part of the Justice Department to be subjecting people to such a situation. So, Mr. Chairman, that's why we're here.
Okay, so
you're back, sir.
Well, I am, but I think the vice chairman's back also. But Vice Chairman Boyd, were you aware of the first part of the conversation?
No, I heard it. I was listening.
Okay.
I guess my question is,
I think I'm gonna defer to you on this anyway, because I'm not sure how to fix this. I want to try. So I'm going to let you take over. I'm going to listen and try not to disrupt.
Well, I guess, Mr. Pruitt, my question is, where's the evidence of this, these allegations going on? We have someone who, is there a report that is signed off by somebody who wants to be known that this happened to?
Well, unfortunately, some of these matters are before the courts right now, and I did cite one within the testimony we give. And two, we have the actual documents. We have the actual policy that states this, and we have the actual document that they had to sign off on in order to implement the policy.
Yeah, did you submit that to the committee?
You know, I thought they was attached to the testimony, but they were not. I can't submit them. But we actually have the written policy from the city council's office, and we also have the release form that they have to execute. And then two, the general orders, where they exist within the police department. It's called it's in there. It's called a rec policy or their normal policy, but it's a part of the general orders within the police department. And this orders came in place. I'm trying to think. I think former Chief Eisen was police chief at that point in time.
Well, I hate to say that I don't believe that happens, because I've had a similar experience with the police. But it's certainly pretty disturbing if people are signing rights away. I guess I would just probably want to have more information before I go too deep into this, so that we'll know, so at least I would know what direction that I think, and it's only my opinion, I'm only the vice chair, we should go on this. And what I don't want to do, I don't want to become a committee where people just write us with complaints about stuff. And I'm not trying to diminish, the work of the NAACP. But I mean, when we start accepting complaints from, credible organizations like yours, and then there's another credible organization, and there's another credible organization, I'm going to question what our role truly should be, because I don't want to become an investigative committee. That's not, I mean, it's within our purview to investigate egregious acts, but I don't think that we want to get all into the weeds of every allegation that is made about things that's going on with anybody's administration. I'm certainly interested in exploring what you've presented, because it's personal for me. But I do caution us taking on complaints as if that's our role, to just investigate complaints from citizens, because that's why we want to have, the civilian review boards, and we want to have the, correction oversight board to deal with certain things. So that's just my first thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was going to go ahead and let you go through everybody. I would say, just in response to that, is I agree that we don't need every, I guess I would say, was it Tom, Dick, and Harry calling us, but I do believe that the NAACP and Mr. Pruitt represents an organization that represents a lot of people, not just himself.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I thought, because I don't know, I was either going to go with you or Alderwoman Davis, only because I don't have a lot of the experience at the Board of Aldermen on. I was unsure, how do we, as the alderman, how, as this committee, or even as alderman, how can we help fix this or change this policy? Or is it some policy that, do we do this as a resolution asking somebody to change this? Or, I guess I'm wanting to defer to people that are more knowledgeable, which I do a lot. But I do think we should try to figure if there's a way to help.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that I think it is important to hear the opinions of every member of the committee to see what the committee wants to do.
Right. I'm gonna let you, and I'm gonna listen, but I'm right here.
Okay. Well, let's go. I've been in here since 10 o'clock this morning, so let's go with Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Boyd too. Alderwoman Davis.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Pruitt, let me share with you that this does happen. It happens frequently. I am a direct part of witnessing 3 of these incidents. And the horrible part about it is, even when these people do this, this still stays on their record. So they've got to go back and get their record expunged just for the arrest part of it. So people don't realize you're not doing yourself a favor by signing off on that, most especially if you know that you are innocent. And I would like to see us hear both sides of this. And I think our role would be, in the end, if we think it's something valid, that we would do a resolution requesting that the appropriate remedies are done through the appropriate departments as far as process and procedure, even if it meant that these complaints go through the oversight committee, which I think is a good place for it, and also making sure that the practice is eliminated. It's about as wrong as anything can be. And if I told you 2 of them that I was directly involved in, you would not believe it. And I think that practice, for me, I became aware of it under Chief Dotson. And I never heard of one under Chief Isom. So we'll find all that out later on. But I think it's something that needs to be explored and put in the right place. Thank you.
Well, I was made that offer when I had an altercation, so I know it probably exists. And I certainly did not take the offer. I said, well, let's just go to court of public opinion, because that was some Friday knuckle bull. But anyway, let's move on to Alderwoman Howard.
I agree with what's been said previously. I'm sure these things do happen. And that I think we need to be aware of it. And I think that as we have the COB, I kind of feel like this might be something that they would take up. And maybe a resolution would be appropriate for addressing these situations and getting the attention of the COB to act in an appropriate manner to follow up on this. It seems an egregious abuse of power to, try it all right there and have people sign off on something that, at a time when they're stressed, adrenaline may be pumping, they feel intimidated that, you have somebody sign off on something and they don't know what they're signing because of all the stress and duress they're under. So I agree that this is something we do need to be aware of and we need to maybe take action on, but I think we need as a committee to decide what that action should be and where it should be. So thank you very much, Mr. Pruitt, for bringing this to our attention.
Is Alderwoman Spencer back with us? Is she there? I don't see her. Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
I agree with the previous Alder people. Because it's gonna be a lot of detailed investigation, and then we'll probably need to bring people to the table. So I agree with them.
Okay, Alderman Bosley, are you still with us? I see this icon, Alderman Bosley. Okay, Alderman Muhammad.
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman. I do want to thank Mr. Pruitt and the NAACP for bringing awareness to this issue. And I look forward to working with the NAACP and all interested partners in fixing this issue. I have nothing. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you again, Mr. Pruitt.
The esteemed Alderman from the 16th Ward, Thomas Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have no questions. Mr. Pruitt, thank you for your time, and I do appreciate that your advocacy around this. We know this can be an issue and is for a lot of our citizens, so thank you, sir.
Okay, Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Boyd, and thank you, Mr. Pruitt, for bringing this up. I do have some experience in the criminal justice system, and I can tell you in various instances.
Just a moment, Alderman Ryan. Somebody needs to mute. Alderman Fox. Thank you. Go ahead.
Is it better now? Okay,
Yes,
cool. Thanks. So I do have some experience in the criminal justice world, and I know that in that world it is common to waive certain rights in criminal defense, such as a preliminary hearing, arraignments, things of that nature. But I know that we've also seen some of those processes abused over the years. We've seen a real strong pushback over the last few years on things like civil asset forfeiture. So I think if there's allegations that this is that this policy is either abusive or being abused, I think it's our obligation, it's our duty to take a look at it and see if it can be remedied. I think that there's always a concern in a situation like this that someone may be signing away their constitutional rights under undue duress. And that's a problem. We certainly don't want people to think that they're being kind of strong-armed into giving up the rights that are enumerated in our United States Constitution, state constitution, or city charter. What I would like to do regarding this is to make sure that we have all the documents on hand for review, and also to hear from any individuals that would be willing to talk to us about their experience with this. And also ultimately to hear from the city councilor's office and get, kind of the other side of the story, if you will, because I have the feeling that we all may not be very far apart on this. I know the city councilor's office doesn't want to deprive people of their constitutional rights. And if that's something that folks feel like is being done, I feel confident that the city councilor would want to remedy that. I think the alderman from the 19th also brought up an interesting point regarding the expungement of the underlying arrest. And I would be curious if we are engaging in a policy like this, if we could maybe tweak the policy to also expunge that underlying arrest when someone was to knowingly sign this waiver, if we were to continue with the current system or something like it, just to ensure that people's rights are being protected. I know it might sound kind of pie in the sky sometimes, but when you walk into a courthouse, most of them say equal justice under law. And I think that it's important that we strive in our policies to create what is truly equal justice under law for every one of our residents. And I think that this is something that we should look into. I think we have an obligation to look into it and to bring all the parties to the table and come up with a fair and equitable way to move through this. And I'm more than happy to do my part in it and to listen to folks who have had this experience, to do the homework on the underlying forms, and also to hear from the city councilor to try and work towards a system that works for everybody. Thank you.
Alderman Ryan, would you mind yielding to some questions from me?
Absolutely.
Okay, first question is civil asset forfeiture. What exactly is that?
So civil asset forfeiture is something that rose to prominence as a result of the war on drugs when there are, say you're engaged in travel throughout the country and you have, let's say $20,000 in cash on you. There's nothing illegal about having $20,000 in cash, but what has happened under a federal law allowing it is that if a law enforcement agency believes that those assets may be involved in criminal activity, that is, say they believe that you're on your way to purchase drugs or these are the proceeds of drugs, of a drug sale, what they can do is actually seize that $20,000. And but unlike in a criminal proceeding where the burden of proof is on the state to prove that you are guilty, this is a civil matter. And so it's a preponderance of the evidence, what's called. So now it's on you, the individual, to prove that your $20,000 was not as a result of criminal activity. And oftentimes what they would do in these instances, whether or not drugs were found, is they would say, if you go ahead and sign this waiver, we will not prosecute you for a drug crime. We're going to keep your $20,000 though. And so there were instances of people who were moving across states or traveling to, say, purchase a car. Say you want to purchase a new car and you're an upstanding citizen and you have $15,000 on you to purchase a car. There's nothing illegal about having $15,000 on you. You're not going to do anything illegal. However, all of a sudden, the government has put you in a position where you either need to prove that this $15,000 came into your hands through legal means and that you weren't going to do anything illegal with it, or else you can sign this waiver and the state can just keep your $15,000.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. You said that and I wrote it down because I never heard that before. So thank you for clarifying that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The other thing I have a request from you, since I think you're the only lawyer on the committee. If we got you a copy of that policy, would you be able to read it and make recommendations about things that may not make sense or that make sense and kind of help us, through that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, and Mr. Pruitt, you say you have a copy of the policy, right?
Yeah, and it says, and it's underlined, say resisting arrest.
Okay. Okay, and if you could just get it to us, and then what I'll do is I'll take what you gave us and I'll request it from the city council office to make sure we have an official copy sent to the Board of Aldermen and there's no, loss of pages.
Sure.
Not to question your integrity.
No,
but, chain of custody is important.
Chain of custody
is a legal term.
I understand.
I
understand very well.
Okay. So thank you, Alderman Ryan.
Absolutely.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. I see Dan Gunther is not on the committee, but I see him. Alderman Gunther, do you have a question?
We still have Alderman Page if he's still here.
Oh, did I? Oh, I'm sorry. Alderman Gunther. I'm gonna come back to you. Alderman Page, I needed to scroll down further on my screen. My bad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. One question comes to mind, and I will say immediately that I am not a lawyer, and neither do I play one on television, as the joke goes. However, one thing comes to mind. I realize that I think a lot of work is going to have to be done on this matter and testimony taken, that sort of thing, to get to the bottom of this, more so than time will allow on this session, in this meeting. But I'm very curious to know, and Mr. Pruitt or Mr. Vice Chair, who has personal experience with this, I'm curious to know, were you under your Miranda rights when that waiver was offered to you? In other words, you had been arrested. Had you been read your Miranda rights, did you have access to counsel when that form was offered to you? I think that's going to be crucial in this matter.
Well, my situation was very unique I was detained. I was not arrested at the
Yeah,
time.
right.
But it was real stupid. It was like, we'll let you go home if you just apologize for what you did. And I refused to apologize for what I did, because what I did was out of an emotional reaction to a situation that any family member or best friend or whatever, or any normal, I'm gonna say average person would have reacted. And so something that was small escalated to something that was big and ridiculous. And it was just a deal. And Sam Dotson was the captain at the time. And I just said, no, I'm not apologizing. And the offer was made, well, we could do this to you. And I just said, well, just go ahead and do it. And we'll just take it to the public, because this is ridiculous. So, and so I know it can happen. And just like I know police officers lie, and not all of them though. And let's be clear with that. So I don't think we have a corrupt system, police system, or judicial system at all. But I do know there are situations where people are treated in a way that's not professional. And I'm just going to keep it clean.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And I realize that your situation may have been a little unique, but I got a feeling that there probably are people who are exposed to this situation who resisting arrest may come with an arrest action. And I think we need to gain some understanding of when this document, this waiver is offered and under what conditions as part of our research into this matter. With that, I'll yield. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to Alderman Bosley. You're on mute, Alderman Bosley.
Thank you. I was a little bit late getting to the phone last time. My apologies, but I am here listening. I appreciate you, Mr. Pruitt, for bringing forth this issue and problem. It's definitely very important for us to know some of the things that are happening out here that we may not be aware of. I was not 100% aware of that until a couple of days ago. That people were being pressed to give away their rights like this. So what I would like to do is learn a little bit more about what potential rights that they are giving away. I'm interested in a lot of things. So sometimes I'm thinking about, on the flip side, with this in particular, what I have been pondering about, if you had a substantial amount of drugs on you and you could have gotten a felony from it, and the police are getting you off saying, hey, if you sign this waiver, we'll not report the drugs that you had on you. Is that something that would be a trade-off to some degree for not having a felony? And that's why, and that's what's, say it again. You said something, Alderwoman Davis. Yes,
I didn't realize my mic was on. I'm sorry.
But I mean, I would like, I'm listening for perspectives on it. I'm just always looking at things from a million different sides. Once again, I just heard about this a few days ago. So I'm,
if you give me permission,
yes, ma'am, please.
Wait a minute. Alderwoman Davis.
Chairman, the Alderwoman from the 19th Guild. Thank you.
Go ahead.
In most instances, this happens when the police have inappropriately done their job and they want to cover it up. So the person may not necessarily have done anything wrong. And this is used to get out of the situation that they're in. And the three that I witnessed, that's what happened. And one was just too extreme. But it would be extremely rare if they did it in a drug case. I can't see that. Okay.
I appreciate that. Once again, I'm listening to everything. That was one of the things that I heard. So, I was just thinking while that conversation was continuing of, the flip side of it. But, those things, once again, are very rare. and Alderwoman Davis is very seasoned. And when I'm not sure about certain things, I generally don't speak on them because I like to research and learn a little bit more about it so I can be more educated on what comes out of my mouth. But I'm also, I'm here as an older person, so things that we are discussing, about questions about, I want to make sure I articulate those questions and get the best answers. So, I appreciate that. That was one of the answers, one of the questions that I did have. I appreciate you bringing this once again to the forefront and giving us an opportunity to discuss it, because it is something that, is affecting our folks and could potentially be something that we could shed some light on and do something about. So, with that, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you also, Alderwoman Davis, and everyone else who spoke.
Okay. We've gone through the committee members. Mr. Chairman, my thought is that, we would get the policy. Alderman Orion agreed to scrub it for us and just give us some of his thoughts. And then we can set another hearing date, and we can have some people who have been impacted. If Mr. Pruitt knows individuals who wants to testify as to how it made them feel going through that process, and what the outcome was, and how we can make the system better.
Yeah, I was supposed to start this the last meeting. It was my fault. Mr. Pruitt didn't go, hey, Joe, my ADD kicked in and I was off on a whole nother world. But no, I wanted to get that discussion started. I didn't know if we do this in like keep doing it in full committee or subcommittee, whether it's a resolution or board bill. And did you ever get to Dan Gunther, that Alderman Gunther, that was?
I did not. There you go.
Okay, I'd like to make sure we get to him, since he's had the patience of being here all day with us.
I have no questions. I really do appreciate you asking, and I appreciate you being here because this has been a very informative public safety meeting. I did put in the chat an article, though, that from St. Louis County that is very similar to what Mr. Pruitt is talking about. So take a look at that article, and I think that's right along the lines of what Mr. Pruitt is talking about. Thank you.
Is that article something they're doing in the county to fix this, or? It's
no,
just
it's a problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah. Thank you, though. Thank you so much for asking.
No. I agree. I knew this was not an easy, I figured there'd even be more arguments. Well, then, I really didn't know. I didn't know how to, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know how to handle this. Mr. Pruitt's been working with me on some other things, as well as Reverend Gray, and I got a lot of respect for him. He's not just some guy that lives in the county trying to tell us how to run the city. He lives in the city. He represents a lot of people. And although he represents Black people, there are white people that run into the same situation. So I don't even know that this is, a racial thing. I think it's a thing that absolutely needs looking at. And I appreciate him bringing it. And I didn't think we were going to resolve this today. And I do appreciate that he got to listen to all the other public safety stuff today and stayed with us. I'm surprised he didn't text me going, Joe. But Vice Chairman Boyd, I am going to leave this up to you on how we, you and Alderwoman Davis and Alderman Orion. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to run and direct how we do, where we go, because this is way beyond anything that I'm.
Sure, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd be more than happy to work with Mr. Pruitt and Alderman Orion on next steps, and maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll come back and figure out how we can have some meaningful, impactful discussions about the situation and how we can make it better.
Please. And then next week, I know that Alderman Muhammad's going to have a bill that we want to hear, and I also know that you're working on getting the police and all that together for the 911 next part of the conversation. So I would think, Mr. Pruitt, if you work with them, it may not be next week, but the week after, I think does that sound right to you?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm not in a rush. We just want to make sure that all of the facts ascertained, and that there's a possibility to rectify the situation, because as you said, you're right, it's not racial. It's for us, it's a civil rights issue. People are waiving their civil rights who may not need to or shouldn't have to, because they were innocent for the reason they were arrested for in the first place. And in some cases, this may have been somebody who was injured by the police when all of this happened, and they're waiving their rights also. And so we do need to understand what is going on with this policy, and the fact that it is a policy of the city law department, and it's a policy of the city's police department. That's the only reason we thought and wanted to bring it to this committee, because these are longstanding in place policies. And in the policies, it says that they cannot let somebody off the hook for resisting arrest unless they sign this. So there's no room. If you were arrested for resisting arrest, innocent or guilty, if that charge is going to go away in the municipal courts, you have no choice but to sign this document for that to happen. And so we just truly worried about that. And Mr. Chairman, I would say this also, one quick thing. I did sit through the hearing. It would be interesting to know the race and sex of those individuals who were turned down for those positions.
I would be interested to know that.
We'd like to look at patterns and practice. So it would be very interesting to know race, age, and sex of all of those folks who were turned away from those jobs in the education department. I'm sorry.
Interesting when they send over 65 people and only 5 get the job, and then they say, "Oh, there's nobody out there who wants to do the job." I was like, "Oh my gosh." Vice Chairman, Boyd, I'm gonna, because I ramble, so I'm gonna let you.
The committee is back in your hands, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, well, Mr. Pruitt,
I think people are ready to go home.
Is there anything you want to add before we leave, or is any member of the committee or outside the committee want to jump in? Anything you want to add?
No, I'm done.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask if it might be good once we get this, even before we get whatever we're doing going, to have a public education piece on this, Alderwoman Davis, because maybe if more people knew like the things you were saying, then maybe they wouldn't, I don't know, because again, I'm like Alderman Page, I'm not a lawyer, but I think maybe if the public knew more about how to handle them, kind of like how we tell our babies what to do when they get pulled over, like that, And I also want to make sure before we close out, Mr. Chairman, if you can re-announce about the deadline for Friday for the Prop S.
Yes, well, that actually, yes. So any member, in fact, I think we should put that back out. So, if you have some group that you're recommending for Prop S, they have to get their application in by this Friday, the deadlines. And since I got in trouble for, going beyond that deadline, we're going to stick with the deadline. So if you have someone that you're recommending for that Prop S, that Prop S money, please make sure that gets turned in. And anyone that's in this committee that's wanting to be on the the committee to look at this, the subcommittee of this committee, they need to contact Vice Chairman Boyd, because he is absolutely in charge of that. And I know that Alderwoman Boyd is interested in going to be on that also, but I take myself out of it only because I'm probably the least to know the different organizations, where a lot of the people on this committee are familiar with these organizations. because there's really not a lot of them that are anywhere near my neighborhood or any that I'm aware of. So, although Story Stitchers has been kind of close to my heart, but I'm just saying that in some communities, there's a lot of these organizations with a lot of need. And certainly that's why I would like that particular group to work in there. That's why I removed myself, because I'm not knowledgeable of the groups. So, Mr. Pruitt, any other closing? Oh,
no, I appreciate all of the time, appreciate what the committee members have said. And I'm looking forward to working on this situation. Is something I think we really need to nail down and get resolved.
And Alderwoman Davis has her hand up, so I don't know if it's related to you or not.
I just wanted to leave this comment about the reviewing of the proposals. I'm more interested in a committee of the whole doing it, and most especially because the committee is a broad committee that covers all sectors of the city. And also, when you get into subcommittees, that means the work has to be done twice by some. And also, as the resolution that governs this, it is only those people who are members of the Public Safety Committee can review these. So a one-time review by the Committee of the Whole just kind of is something I lean toward. Thank you.
The reason for the subcommittee, there's so many parts to this thing, and I screwed it up. I mean, I'm the one that screwed it up, and the money was not distributed because it goes to Incarnate Word, I believe it is, and then they rank it, and then the subcommittee doesn't necessarily follow the ranking, but there's so many parts to it. That's why. And then usually they recommend, and then I would say if you and the vice chairman get together and talk, I'm in this particular one, I bow to his, because I have a lot of respect for you and him. You got more time on than me. You got a lot of knowledge. So I would say used to discuss. However, but I can say that I don't have enough knowledge of it to know what's a group that really we need to be looking at. Do we look at the larger groups that already get a bunch of money from other places, and or do we look at only small groups? But why don't you and the vice chairman and Alderwoman Boyd, and are we done with Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Pruitt,
I believe we are.
I think if you want to sign off, you certainly can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. God bless. Thank you so much. So I would just ask maybe if you get together, we got everybody here now, or at least most of us are here now. I still think how we do it, I'd like to keep Alderman Boyd in charge of it. Does anyone else on the committee have, I just say, why don't we don't have to go in any order. If somebody has something to say, just start to say it. I think we'll be okay like that.
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Hey, this is Alderman Collins Muhammad. I think that I just got a question for Alderwoman Davis. When you say committee of the whole, do you mean the entire board committee of the whole, or mean that this public?
No, the committee of the whole that has the responsibility, which is the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly. That was all. I didn't know if you meant the entire board of aldermen, the committee of the whole, or just this particular committee with its jurisdiction. I'm fine either way. I think the way the chairman does it now is kind of in line with the way it was done with the former chairman before him, that being Alderman Kennedy. He kind of did it the exact same way. He set up a subcommittee to go through the applications and to follow up with the Department of Public Safety to figure out what was going to be the best recommendations and who was going to make the best use of the money. And from my understanding, a a few big organizations did get funded, but the primary focus was for smaller grassroots organizations. And I think it's best if we keep it that way, because I think those are the organizations, I'm just speaking in general now, I think those are the organizations that's on the ground in all of our wards, but necessarily don't have the resources or don't have the big financing behind them. But I do know there were some big organizations we did fund. I believe we did fund Big Brothers Big Sisters at one point. We did do some funding for Urban League. And I think we did some funding for, I think it was the Girl Scouts of Eastern Missouri, which I think those were absolutely fantastic. But I think majority of the rest of that, 900,000. I just think it's, I'm just speaking in general again.
And I worry a little bit about messing it up, because it goes to, I believe there's other steps to this thing that I'm going to, Alderman Boyd or Vice Chairman Boyd, I mean, this goes in current word. It's got so many steps. What I don't want to do is screw it up. And I already did it once. And I will admit I'm the one that screwed it up. So, Alderman Boyd, Vice Chairman Boyd.
I think I'm fine with the way we've been doing it. But I certainly will listen to others' opinions.
Well, somebody has to, even if we do it as the whole, somebody still has to, other than me, has to send this. I mean, you're knowledgeable of where it goes, and it has to go to, let's see, here's the,
Mr. Chairman.
You know what? I'm sorry, we can't discuss this. This wasn't on the agenda to discuss. I just got that from Terry, from the clerk. So, and he said Prop S could be an announcement, but was not. Okay, so yeah, so I'm out of order, which I am a lot. Why don't we, it was more just an announcement that make sure at this point that everybody gets in. And I would ask the clerk who's listening, please send something to all the members of the board. Then, not to forget, Friday's the deadline for the groups to get their things in. And yeah, so I guess I messed up with that. So I would, at this point, I guess we can adjourn if everybody wants to.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that. God bless. Thank you guys, and thank this committee for these long meetings.
All right. Good night, everybody.